Chapter 534. Just as everyone was puzzled, more than 10 people suddenly appeared in the main hall. The emperors looked carefully. The more they looked, the more shocked they became. Because these people were all in the martial god realm. Emperor Hashan's entire face turned snow-white. He muttered in disbelief, "Impossible, this is impossible, this is definitely not true, kill them." After Yi Hao finished speaking, he left the main hall. In an instant, the gods attacked and all the emperors fell. Even before they died, the emperors still had a look of disbelief on their faces. They were roaring in their hearts. What kind of existence did they provoke? The demonic beasts around them were all at the peak of the martial saint realm, and there were thousands of them. And this was without them knowing that Yi Hao had released another 10,000 demonic beasts. There were even more than 10 martial gods beside him. Which faction's young master was this to be able to have such a big lineup? And after the emperors died, the secret realm became a one-sided massacre. 8,000 ancient demonic beasts and 6,000 sky-devouring rats killed the 900 million soldiers, causing them to cover their heads and flee like rats. As long as the ancient demonic beasts and sky-devouring rats appeared, they would definitely be killed without leaving a single armor behind. Each attack of the ancient demonic beasts and sky-devouring rats could take away dozens of lives. Destroying a small team of 1,000 people was something that happened in the blink of an eye. Even if the He Shan camp had 900 million soldiers, they would not be able to withstand such a battle. At this moment, on the dynasty battle list, no one could clearly see the dragon power column behind the He Shan camp and Yang Long's camp. This was because the speed of the decrease and increase of the dragon power, as well as the changes in the numbers, were completely indiscernible. What exactly is happening in this secret realm? Could it be that the He Shan camp is playing with suicide? The crowd were all making guesses. They were completely unable to imagine what could have caused such a situation. Even in the history of the Myriad Kingdom continent, such a thing had never happened. No, it had happened not long ago, and it was also caused by the Fire Dragon Empire. Everyone was puzzled. What kind of divine being was this Fire Dragon Empire? Boom! Emperor Hashan's dynasty will be destroyed. Everyone suddenly heard a clap of thunder and immediately looked up. Only to see a few blood-red words written on the imperial ranking board, shocking people to the core. Emperor Hashan was destroyed so quickly. At this moment, everyone was staring at the imperial dynasty rankings, unable to come back to their senses for a long time. Everyone looked at the dynasty ranking board and felt that it was a little unreal. Rumble, the Dao dynasty is destroyed. Hong Long, the Pan dynasty is destroyed. Rumble, the Black Gold Empire is destroyed. The thunderclaps in the sky did not stop. While everyone was still in a daze, a total of 37 thunderclaps sounded. Everyone looked at the dynasty leaderboard and saw a series of information about the destruction of countries. At that moment, their feelings were indescribable. So many countries had been destroyed at once, and most importantly, it was done by a single faction. Even if it wasn't recorded in the annals of history, it was unlikely. This was simply a heaven-shaking miracle. Everyone thought about it. Previously, Emperor Hashan had provoked Yang Long's camp, and now, his country had been destroyed. Previously, He Shan's camp's actions were like clowns. It was incomparably laughable. They weren't afraid of you at all. They just couldn't be bothered to fight with you. How about it? Now you know the pain. At this moment, everyone pointed their spears at He Shan's camp without holding back. If Emperor Hashan knew what everyone was thinking at this moment, he would probably die from anger. Rumble. Suddenly, an even louder clap of thunder pulled everyone back from their discussion. Everyone immediately looked at the dynasty leaderboard again. Then, their gazes were completely fixed on the dynasty leaderboard. Emperor Wen's dynasty is destroyed. What? Even the Emperor dynasty is destroyed. What exactly happened in the secret realm? Everyone looked at the dynasty leaderboard. There were only 2 emperor dynasties left in He Shan's camp. Sure enough, as everyone expected, the 2 imperial empires soon showed signs of being destroyed. A country with 14 dragon power had destroyed a camp with 900 million people. At this moment, everyone still felt that it was too unreal. However, The dynasty leaderboard was definitely not fake. Regardless of whether they believed it or not, they had to believe it because the dynasty leaderboard was definitely not fake. This fire dragon empire is indeed worthy of the word empire. It's definitely the biggest dark horse in this myriad kingdom banquet. Oh my god, this is simply too exciting. This battle will definitely be recorded in the annals of history for future generations to admire. This myriad kingdom banquet really wasn't a waste of time. I just want to know where this fire dragon empire is. Why do I want to join so much? What a coincidence. Me too. Can you bring me along? I also want to join the fire dragon empire. At this moment, Yi Hao was in the secret realm. He would never have thought that his actions at this moment would accidentally cause a wave of people to join the fire dragon empire. Countless cultivators began to search for the fire dragon empire's location, begging to join the fire dragon empire. At this moment, everyone in the fire dragon empire was even more excited. Long live His Majesty! His Majesty is simply too powerful. I wonder how His Majesty did it. I live and die as a member of the Fire Dragon Empire. I will die as a ghost of the Fire Dragon Empire. It's definitely our honor to have such a majesty. I can't take it anymore. I want to bear His Majesty's children. His Majesty is invincible. Let's see who dares to bully our Fire Dragon Empire in the future. Wasn't that He Shan camp very powerful previously? Didn't they still get wiped out by His Majesty? Let's see if they still dare to show off. Old son, I have a feeling that I'm dragging His Majesty down. Me too. At this moment, the Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun were looking at the dynasty leaderboard and swallowed their saliva as they spoke. The two of them felt as if they had been on a roller coaster ride. However, they were completely numb now. Thinking back, they didn't believe in Yi Hao previously. What a slap to their faces now. If I had known, I would have followed His Majesty. I want to see how His Majesty did it. At this moment, the two of them were filled with regret. They regretted not following Yi Hao to see this historical moment happen. Alright, stop lamenting. Our next task is very important. Chen Zixiao interrupted the two of them. Looking at their stunned faces, Chen Zixiao said in annoyance, His Majesty wiped out so many countries in the mystic realm. Do you think these countries will let it go so easily? Hearing Chen Zixiao's words, their expressions changed. They looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Although these countries were wiped out, it was only the disappearance of their dragon power. And these countries in the real world hadn't been completely wiped out yet. Although the disappearance of their dragon power would cause these countries' morale to drop. But a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even a cornered dog will jump over a wall. Chapter 535. Then what are we waiting for? Let's kill them before they react. The Fire Emperor pulled out his weapon. That's right. Let's kill them first and talk later. Emperor Sun agreed. They finally understood why Yi Hao didn't bring them along. Instead, he had them stay near the He Shan camp. It turned out that Yi Hao had already predicted this from the start. Then let's compete and see who can reclaim more land. Chen Zixiao laughed. At this moment, he was treating the He Shan camp's land as his own. There's no time to lose. Let's do it. Old Chen, if you lose, you have to treat us to wine. The Fire Emperor couldn't help but lick his lips. Oh so you're still thinking about this bit of wine. This is the Lord's wine. I can't make the decision. Chen Zixiao laughed. When the time comes, we'll reclaim these lands and ask for a reward from the Lord. Emperor Sun immediately said. Alright then, let's begin. The Fire Emperor finished speaking and took the lead to charge out. The army that was already prepared started moving. Originally, the Fire Empire only had 100 million soldiers. However, when they reclaimed Emperor Wu and the other empires, they expanded their army by 300 million soldiers. At this moment, the 400 million soldiers were like a sandstorm as they charged toward the imperial dynasty in the He Shan camp. Uncles, the enemy forces are too big. We have to split up. Since he had become Yi Hao's subject, the Fire Emperor no longer called Huiji and the others imperial uncles. Alright, wait for me to regroup. We can't lose to Chen Zixiao and Emperor Sun, Hu Ji and the others immediately shouted in response. One had to know that time was tight and the mission was heavy. The emperor dynasty in the He Shan camp, not including the 3 emperor dynasties, probably had at least 3.4 billion soldiers. This was several times the number of soldiers of the Fire Dragon Empire. Luckily, they had listened to Yi Hao and gathered all their soldiers. The soldiers of the He Shan camp were too spread out and didn't have a chance to regroup. Hence, they could only take advantage of this opportunity to wipe out all these empires. When the army gathered together, there would be hundreds of millions of them. They would definitely be able to wipe out these dynasties with the momentum of sweeping away fallen leaves. The Fire Emperor, Hu Ji, and the others immediately split into 5 groups and attacked the 5 empires. As for the Fire Emperor, Hu Ji, and the other 4, they broke through 5 imperial empires at lightning speed and destroyed 5 imperial capitals. Even so, the 5 empires were still completely dumbfounded. They didn't even know that the imperial capital had been destroyed. The first thing that the Fire Emperor did was to kill all the members of the imperial family and the ministers. Those who deserved to be killed were killed and those who deserved to be captured. The remaining small fries simply couldn't cause too much of a stir. Damned Fire Dragon Empire, die, die. Emperor Hashan roared like a madman within Emperor Hashan's capital. The other emperors also had ugly expressions on their faces. At this moment, they had yet to recover from the blow of the destruction of their nation. They did not expect that their dynasty would be destroyed so quickly. This was the destruction of an empire. Thousands of years of foundation was destroyed in a day. They couldn't understand how it could happen in such a short time. Alliance leader He Shan, what should we do now? There were still some emperors who asked unwillingly. Everyone, please calm down. It's our fault. We didn't expect that kid to have so many experts by his side. Emperor Hashan immediately calmed his anger and said. It was as he said. He would never have thought that Yi Hao would have so many martial gods. If he had known that Yi Hao had so many martial gods at the start, he would never have gone against Yi Hao. But now, before they could even make a name for themselves, their country had already been destroyed. It would be difficult for him not to be ridiculed. Even so, he was still a little unwilling. He was unwilling to accept that his country was gone just like that. He was unwilling to accept that Yi Hao had stolen his limelight. Therefore, although he was filled with fear for Yi Hao, he was also filled with hatred for Yi Hao. At this thought, Emperor Hashan said, Everyone, now that things have come to this, are you willing to just let this matter go? Of course not. Otherwise, why would we still be here? That's right. That damned Fire Dragon Empire destroyed everything I had. How can I just let it go like that? When I think of that brat and his arrogant appearance, I want to pull out his tendons and drink his blood. The emperors said angrily. Everyone, since things have come to this, why don't we fight them to the death? Emperor Hashan was very satisfied when he saw the emperor's emotional fluctuations. Emperor Hashan, what should we do? The emperors immediately asked Emperor Hashan. What we need to do now is to gather all the soldiers we can and slaughter the Fire Dragon Empire. Kill as many as we can. Since things have come to this point, what's there to be afraid of? Emperor Hashan said viciously. The emperors were shocked when they heard Emperor Hashan's words. They didn't expect Emperor Hashan to really fight to the death. However, Emperor Hashan's idea was indeed in line with everyone's wishes. Emperor Hashan immediately said, at this moment, that brat must still be proud of killing us. Let's kill his people and teach him a lesson. Let's see if he's arrogant or not. Emperor Hashan glanced at everyone. What do you all think? The emperors looked at each other and agreed. Let's do as the Alliance Master says. Kill everyone from the Fire Dragon Empire. That's right. We can't do anything to him in the secret realm. I don't believe that we can't do anything to him in the real world. Alliance Master Hashan, we'll do as you say. We're the closest to the Fire Dragon Empire. Let's teach them a lesson first. Hearing the Emperor's words, Emperor Hashan was immediately satisfied. Good. You all will be the vanguard. We'll follow closely behind. Just as the Emperors were deep in discussion, A few people suddenly took out their sound transmission talismans. The emperor's expressions changed. They had a bad premonition. This was because they took out emergency sound transmission talismans. If there wasn't anything serious, they definitely wouldn't use these sound transmission talismans. Crack. Suddenly, one of the emperors became dispirited after reading the sound transmission talisman. He directly crushed the sound transmission talisman in his hand. The other emperors weren't in a much better state. The emperors looked over in confusion. Emperor Hashan frowned and asked, "What happened?" The emperor who crushed the sound transmission talisman slowly raised his head and looked at Emperor Hashan. Then, he looked at the emperors. Seeing the confusion on the emperors' faces, he still answered, "My people sent news. Just now, a powerful army rushed into the imperial capital of our dynasty. All the troops were killed." After saying this, his body became like a deflated balloon. He started to become dispirited. Chapter 536. What was going on? The emperors couldn't believe that the Fire Dragon Empire could be so fast. They thought that the plan they had discussed was fast enough. If nothing went wrong, they would be able to deal a fatal blow to the Fire Dragon Empire. However, they had just finished discussing and something went wrong. How were they supposed to live? Emperor Hashan frowned. His face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He looked at the other emperors and asked in a low voice, "What's going on with you guys?" The other emperors also looked gloomy and said, "Same for us. The imperial capital has been destroyed. Now, the country is completely destroyed. Who did it?" Emperor Hashan continued to ask. The emperors could clearly hear Emperor Hashan's voice as he gritted his teeth. "The Fire Dragon Empire," the emperors said in unison. Emperor Hashan's body suddenly trembled. Fart. Suddenly, Emperor Hashan spat out a mouthful of blood. The emperors immediately went up to support him out of concern. Why? Why did it turn out like this? Do the heavens really want me to die? Emperor Hashan held his chest unwillingly and roared into the sky. When the emperors saw Emperor Hashan's appearance, although they didn't want to admit it, they could only lower their heads because they weren't any better. "Quick, have all your troops retreat. We can't let them kill anymore. Otherwise, we'll really have nothing left." Emperor Hashan suddenly raised his head and said to the emperors anxiously. Hearing Emperor Hashan's words, the emperors immediately took out their respective voice transmission talismans and ordered their men to retreat. "Keep as many as you can. It's up to fate." Emperor Hashan sighed and thought to himself as he watched the emperor's actions. "Quickly retreat with me. This place isn't safe anymore. Reporting to your majesty, several of our cities have been attacked by an unknown army." As soon as Emperor Hashan finished speaking, a guard came in to report. The emperors looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. They didn't expect the Fire Dragon Empire to be so fast. The emperors were actually feeling bitter in their hearts. That was because they were all wondering what sort of existence they had provoked. Putting aside the fact that he had annihilated them in the secret realm, in the real world, he had even pursued them relentlessly, turning them into stray dogs. "Retreat," Emperor Hashan said through gritted teeth. The emperors then flew out of the palace. Emperor Hashan looked at his palace reluctantly. "Alliance Master Hishan, leave quickly," the emperors advised anxiously because they had already discovered that many cities were already burning with the flames of war. They couldn't help but be shocked by the speed of the Fire Dragon Empire's march, which could only be described as terrifying. In the secret realm, Yi Hao recalled all the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats, leaving only Guo Yifan. "Let's go," Yi Hao immediately said to Guo Yifan. "Yes," Guo Yifan replied and immediately flew into the void with Yi Hao. "My origin fragment, I'm coming," Yi Hao thought excitedly. Although the name origin fragment didn't sound good, it was still a part of the origin fragment. It was the origin power of the Myriad Lands continent. The two of them flew in front of the origin fragment again, and Yi Hao reached out to take it. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining the origin fragment. You have gained 300 million experience points. Please continue to work hard. What surprised Yi Hao was that even though he had obtained an incomplete origin fragment, he could still obtain experience points. Uproar. Suddenly, Yi Hao felt the world shake. This. Yi Hao looked down and realized that the space below was rapidly collapsing and being destroyed. Could it be that this mystic realm was transformed from the essence fragments? Yi Hao guessed in his heart. In reality, Yi Hao didn't know that an origin fragment could support an area of an entire level. The origin fragment in Yi Hao's hand was the energy source that supported all the secret realms at the dynasty level. All the secret realms of the dynasty seemed to be separated and formed independent areas, but they were all connected. It was just that they couldn't sense each other. Therefore, Yi Hao's action at this moment was undoubtedly taking away the energy source of all the secret realms of the dynasty. Without the support of energy, these secret realms naturally couldn't support themselves. Not only the secret realm under Yi Hao's feet, but all the secret realms of the dynasty were rapidly collapsing at this moment. Oh my God, what's going on? Why is the secret realm collapsing? After all the forces of the dynasty were sent out of the secret realm, they were all still in shock. Everyone immediately cared about their own dragon power and looked towards the dynasty. In the end, everyone was dumbfounded because the imperial dynasty ranking had actually disappeared. Everyone immediately rubbed their eyes and looked at the sky again. They realized that it was indeed so. The other levels of the country board were still intact. Only the dynasty board wasn't in the sky, as if it had never appeared. This matter immediately spread throughout the entire continent. After all, the Myriad Country Board was the most straightforward place to understand the forces of the Myriad Country continent. At this moment, the disappearance of the Dynasty Board for no reason was definitely a big deal. The disappearance of the Dynasty Board was like a bolt of lightning that caused the entire continent to boil. All the forces were frantically investigating the reason for the disappearance of the Dynasty Board. What's this door for? At this moment, Yi Hao knew nothing about the outside world. He looked at the golden door beside him and was very curious. Should I go in or not? Yi Hao looked at the golden door in front of him. Behind the golden door was full of unknowns. Therefore, at this moment, he was very conflicted. Because behind the golden door might be full of danger, but it might also be full of opportunities. After all, he also didn't know what was behind the golden door. No matter how he looked at it, this golden door was a teleportation door. Yi Hao didn't know where this golden door would teleport him. And it was very likely that it would teleport him to a dangerous place. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining the mission. Do you accept it? Just as Yi Hao was conflicted, the system's notification suddenly sounded. Hey, there's actually a mission? Yi Hao couldn't help but be curious about the mission that the system suddenly issued. He was curious about what mission the system would issue at this time. Mission requirement: host enters the golden door. Mission reward: origin fragment. After checking the mission, Yi Hao was delighted. He looked at the golden door excitedly and guessed, could it be that behind the golden door is another secret realm with origin fragment? Come in. Yi Hao made up his mind. Even if it was for the origin fragment, the dangers behind the golden door were worth it for him to enter. Looking at the golden door in front of him, Yi Hao was still a little nervous, but he was also filled with curiosity. This was human nature. They would be filled with curiosity and fear towards the unknown. Chapter 537. Kill them. Kill these bastards. After Yi Hao stepped through the golden door, he heard shouts in his head. Where are the shouts? Yi Hao became cautious and looked around. Where is this? Yi Hao realized that he was in the midst of a small team of 100 people. This small team of 100 people was chasing after a small team of 10 people. That small team of 10 people was desperately trying to escape, while the small team of 100 people was trying their best to catch up. Yi Hao didn't understand where he was. Brat, who are you? Why are you here? Suddenly, a loud shout sounded in Yi Hao's ears. Yi Hao snapped back to his senses and realized that he was surrounded by a small team of 100 people. One of them, who looked like a leader, was glaring at him. That small team leader looked at Yi Hao arrogantly. When he saw that Yi Hao didn't speak, he wanted to slap him. Kid, I'm asking you a question. Do you want to die? Leader, I don't think this kid is anything good. Let's just kill him. I think this kid is a spy from the enemy camp. We should interrogate him properly. The rest of the team looked at Yi Hao and started discussing. You're asking for death. Yi Hao looked at the small team leader's cultivation and realized that he was only at the marshal general level. How could he let him off so easily? He slapped him with the back of his hand. Slap. Whoosh. Yi Hao slapped the small team leader's face. The small team leader flew out and spun 360 degrees in the air. Bam! The small team leader fell to the ground. He couldn't be more dead. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for increasing his dragon power by 1. At the same time, the system notification sounded. I knew it. When he heard the system notification, Yi Hao knew that his guess was right. This was also a mystic realm. However, the level of this mystic realm didn't seem too high. Let me ask you, which force do you belong to? Yi Hao looked at the small team of 100 people who were in a daze and asked them. At this moment, the small team of 100 people only recovered from their shock when they heard Yi Hao's question. Oh my God, run! Suddenly, someone shouted. Everyone immediately scattered like birds and beasts, fleeing in all directions. Each and every one of them was only a beginner warrior, which meant that they had just become warriors. In their hearts, the small leader was already their guardian angel. He was already considered very powerful. But now, he had been slapped to death by Yi Hao. They had never seen such a scene before. At this moment, they wished they had 8 legs so that they could run faster. Sigh. Yi Hao sighed helplessly as he looked at the fleeing crowd. He was also unwilling to kill these people who did not even have the strength to truss up a chicken. After all, he did not have much enmity with them. However, these people were all dragon power. How could Yi Hao let them off so easily? Besides, they wouldn't really die if they killed these people in the secret realm, so Yi Hao didn't feel too guilty. In the blink of an eye, Yi Hao killed everyone except for one person. What are you trying to do? The guard who was caught by Yi Hao was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He asked in a panic and almost shouted. Tell me, what force are you from? Yi Hao continued to ask. He wanted to know which dynasty this secret realm belonged to. I am from the Peng dynasty, the guard answered nervously. Then you can die. After Yi Hao finished speaking, he easily killed the guard. Go, kill everyone. Yi Hao immediately released dozens of magical beasts. According to the dragon power of the dynasty, there should be more than 1,000 dragon power. Although compared to his current 900 million dragon power, it seemed pitiful. However, in Yi Hao's opinion, even a mosquito's leg was meat. He couldn't waste it. Moreover, there was more than one dynasty here. There were at least 20 of them. 20 dynasties added together, there would be at least 20,000 dragon power. Just as Yi Hao killed the previous 100 guards, the 10,000 Kingdoms continent was in an uproar again. Everyone was still puzzled by the disappearance of the dynasty list. Suddenly, 9 claps of thunder sounded in the sky. Everyone knew that the thunder of the 10,000 Kingdoms ceremony wouldn't sound casually. The more it sounded, the more important it was. In history, it only sounded 4 times at most. But this time, it sounded 9 times in a row. Everyone knew that something big was going to happen. Look, what is that? Suddenly, someone pointed to the sky. A blood-red giant list appeared in the sky. This blood-red giant list appeared in the middle of all the dynasty lists. It was even bigger than all the dynasty list. The light of the giant red list instantly covered all the dynasty lists and reached the ground that everyone was looking at. Everyone was curious. What was this list that had never appeared before? Did it have anything to do with the disappearance of the dynasty list? Words appeared on it. Suddenly, someone saw it again. This time, no one cared because everyone's eyes were fixed on the giant red list and the golden words that gradually appeared on the list. Random entry. Everyone saw the 3 red words on the red list and didn't understand what it meant. Could it be that such a big commotion was given such an ordinary name? Just as everyone was curious about the meaning of this random entry into the leaderboard, a voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly, Someone noticed the matter on the dynasty list. Look at the dynasty list. There is a country's dragon power that is decreasing substantially. Just as everyone looked over, the random entry list suddenly shook with red light. 4 words appeared on the random entry list again. Fire Dragon Empire. What's going on? Why is it the Fire Dragon Empire? Why is the Fire Dragon Empire's name on the random entry list? What does the Fire Dragon Empire and the random entry list mean? I'm confused. Is there any record of this in history? Can you explain to us what it means to randomly enter the rankings? At this moment, everyone in the Myriad Kingdom continent was confused by this random entry into the leaderboard. Because this had never appeared in the 10,000 Kingdoms continent before. Otherwise, if there were records in history, they wouldn't have to make such a fuss. Look at the Fire Dragon Empire's dragon power. It's actually increasing. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in disbelief. Everyone was shocked and looked at the Fire Dragon Empire's dragon power in disbelief. Behind the Fire Dragon Empire, there was a series of numbers. The numbers behind were increasing 100, exactly 100. Suddenly, someone shouted loudly, which immediately aroused everyone's curiosity. What 100? Look at the Peng dynasty. Its dragon power decreased by 100, but the Fire Dragon Empire's dragon power increased by 100. That person quickly said, "How is this possible?" Everyone's jaws dropped when they heard this. Chapter 538. Is this what it means to enter the list randomly? But how did he do it? Everyone finally understood what it meant to enter the list randomly. But then, they became even more confused and curious. Because in the Myriad Kingdom continent, such a thing has never happened before. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was so inconceivable, but it really happened. Everyone's feelings toward the Fire Dragon Empire could no longer be described with words. This was because the impact that the Flame Dragon Empire had brought upon them was simply too great. In the first round, they defeated Emperor Wu and the others. In the second round, they were even more heaven-defying. They used 14 dragon power points to fight against 900 million dragon power points and won miraculously. Before they could even catch their breath, Yi Hao actually made it into the list randomly. Everyone was suspecting whether the disappearance of the dynasty rankings was related to Yi Hao at this moment. Looks like this kingdom camp that was randomly entered is going to be unlucky, someone said regretfully. This was because Yi Hao did not even put 900 million dragon points in his eyes, and he had eaten all of it. This was only 20,000 or so dragon points, not to mention Yi Hao. Sure enough, in an instant, the 2 camps on the kingdom list were destroyed at the same time. Boom! Suddenly, there was a clap of thunder. Everyone looked over and realized that the kingdom list had disappeared just like the dynasty list. What's going on? Everyone's eyes widened. Looks like the disappearance of the dynasty list is related to the Fire Dragon Empire. Needless to say, it's definitely done by the Fire Dragon Empire. I'm just curious. How did he do it? Everyone looked at the kingdom list that disappeared, their hearts filled with curiosity and doubt. However, Wang Guobang's disappearance caused everyone to point their fingers at the Flame Dragon Empire. Because of the disappearance of the kingdom list, everyone guessed that the disappearance of the dynasty list must be related to Yi Hao. Go and find out where this Fire Dragon Empire is. At this moment, in the 4 Demons Alliance, the 4 Demons gods held an emergency meeting. Alliance Master, this Fire Dragon Empire definitely has an incredible secret. We must dig it out. The Western Demon God said immediately. Of course, but the other forces won't be idle either. We must act quickly. The Eastern Demon God stroked his white beard and said. After saying that, the Eastern Demon God closed his eyes and pondered. Then, his eyes lit up. Send me 10 Death God's emissaries. We must capture the Fire Dragon Empire's emperor. When everyone heard the Eastern Demon God's words, they were all shocked. Many people even fear when they heard the death emissaries. That was because, in their eyes, the emissaries of the Death God were not humans at all, but killing machines. All the emissaries of the Death God had to undergo devilish training from the moment they were born. It could be said that there were countless casualties, and those who survived were all elites. All the emissaries of the death god had completely lost their ability to think. In their minds, there was only obedience and slaughter. The average strength of an envoy of the death god was around the 7th order martial god realm. The cultivation of many people present couldn't even compare to the death god's emissaries. The death god's emissaries didn't fear death and didn't feel pain. Unless they were killed, even 8th or 9th level martial gods might not be their opponents. The death god's emissaries were the Four Demons Alliance's ultimate trump card. Normally, they wouldn't take action. Once they took action, there was no mission they couldn't complete. Moreover, all of them were difficult missions. But this time, the Eastern Demon God actually sent out 10 Death God's emissaries. It was obvious how important the Fire Dragon Empire was to him. Actually, the Eastern Demon God couldn't be blamed for this. He already saw a trace of danger from the Fire Dragon Empire. The Fire Dragon Empire's growth was too heaven-defying. Previously, it was only 14 dragon power points. Now, it had broken through to 900 million dragon power points. With another 100 million dragon power points, it could be promoted to a holy dynasty. Moreover, the disappearance of the dynasty ranking, as well as the appearance of random entrants, made him have to take it seriously. In the current Myriad Kingdom continent, the Four Demons Alliance was one of the strongest holy dynasties, excluding the godly nation. Therefore, he definitely couldn't let Yi Hao, this unstable factor, grow recklessly. This was also the unspoken rule of the Myriad Kingdom continent. Many old factions didn't want to see new factions grow. Therefore, they would definitely take measures. The new factions would either be destroyed, submit, or soar. Basically, the chances of submitting were the highest. But as long as they submitted, they would basically be exploited by the old factions. They would be completely turned into dogs without any power to resist. Therefore, many factions would rather die than submit. They were directly destroyed by the old factions. There was only a very, very small chance that they could soar to the top and destroy the old factions. The Four Demons Alliance was such an old faction. There were at least 8,000 factions that were destroyed by the Four Demons Alliance. There were also countless geniuses that were destroyed by the Four Demons Alliance. The remaining geniuses all became members of the Four Demons Alliance and worked hard for the Four Demons Alliance. There had never been anyone who could break free from the Four Demons Alliance's restraints. Otherwise, the Four Demons Alliance wouldn't exist. The most powerful one was the Devouring Demon God. The Devouring Demon God controlled countless powerhouses and almost destroyed the Four Demons Alliance. In the end, the Four Demons Alliance had to request for reinforcements to kill the Devouring Demon God. Therefore, from then on, the Four Demons Alliance became even more domineering. They only had one goal, either submit or be destroyed. And Yi Hao was targeted by the Four Demons Alliance. Things were not looking good for him. In everyone's opinion, no matter how jubilant Yi Hao was, there would only be two inevitable outcomes. He would either be destroyed or become a tool of the Four Demons Alliance. Alliance Master, this matter is different. It will probably cause a commotion, the Southern Demon God said worriedly. The Eastern Demon God also looked worried. The thing that the Southern Demon God was worried about was also what he was worried about. Because the four god nations wouldn't easily make a move. But it was different this time. With such a big change, it would be difficult for the four god nations to not make a move. The disappearance of the dynasty rankings would definitely affect the future structure of the Myriad Kingdom continent. It was absolutely intolerable for the four god nations to be in control. But then, the Eastern Demon God thought of something. His brows relaxed and a cunning smile appeared on his face. Don't worry. I'm afraid the four god nations won't be free to deal with this matter for the time being. When everyone heard the Eastern Demon God's words, their hearts trembled. Because there was definitely a story behind the Eastern Demon God's words. But the matter of the four god nations wasn't something that people of their level could worry about. And from the looks of it, the Eastern Demon God didn't seem to want to talk about it. No matter how curious they were, no one dared to ask first. While they were talking, the 10 Death God's messengers had already appeared in the main hall. Catcher. The sound of heavy metal rubbing against each other pierced everyone's eardrums. Everyone immediately looked up. The 10 Death God's messengers were already standing in the main hall, wearing heavy armor. The Death God's messengers' heavy armor covered their entire bodies. Behind them were blood-red cloaks. Chapter 539. The messengers of the Death God all wore metal masks on their faces. Even their eyes were completely covered, so it was impossible to see their true appearances. Every emissary of the Death God was full of mystery to everyone present. Only the Alliance Master could see the true appearances of these messengers of the Death God. The messengers of the Death God were filled with a murderous and bloody aura, which made many people present feel uncomfortable. Greetings, Alliance Master. The 10 messengers of the Death God's hoarse voices were like machines rubbing against each other. It made people shudder when they heard it. You all know my orders, right? The East Shore God looked at the 10 messengers of the Death God and asked in a dignified tone. At the same time, he looked at these messengers of the Death God with a smug look in his eyes. This was because these messengers of the Death God were personally trained by him. Yes. The 10 messengers of the Death God spoke simply, as if they were unwilling to say another word. Then go. If you fail the mission, you don't have to come back. Yes. The 10 messengers of the Death God clearly did not expect the East Shore God to give a death order. The East Shore God meant that if they failed to capture Yi Hao, they would have to die to atone for their sins. However, they were already used to such missions. In their dictionary, there were only 2 possibilities. Either they completed the mission or they died. The 10 messengers of the Death God immediately turned and left. Their movements were not sloppy as they charged towards the Fire Dragon Empire. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining origin energy fragments. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 100 million experience point. Yi Hao kept the origin energy fragments in the Duchy region into the space. Instantly, the entire Duchy's secret realm collapsed. Yi Hao was already used to such scenes. Yi Hao looked at the void beneath his feet and stepped into the golden door beside him. Seeing the world in front of him, Yi Hao immediately released the ancient mutated beasts. Kill. Instantly, thousands of ancient mutated beasts charged out. Looks like this should be the Duchy region's secret realm, Yi Hao guessed as he sensed the martial power in the air. Now, he no longer needed to capture people to be able to determine the level of the secret realm he was in. Sure enough, a system notification rang out in his mind a moment later. Looks like it's still a little short. Looking at his dragon power, it was obvious that this secret realm could not allow his dragon power to break through to 1 billion points. I'm almost there. After a while, the notification in his mind stopped, and Yi Hao immediately rushed into the void. 4th Origin Energy Fragments. Yi Hao looked at the Origin Energy Fragments in front of him. This was already the 4th Origin Energy Fragment. After collecting the Origin Source Fragment, Yi Hao immediately entered the Golden Door. Spirit Nation Regions 5th Fragment. Kingdom Regions Kingdom S Region Emperor's Kingdoms here. Yi Hao's God to Realm God Realm 2 of the Earth Gods of the World of Gods Territory He God of the World's Gods of the World Gods to him SS of the Gods. God of the God of God of the God Gods of the God of the God God of the God of you of the. Yi Hao heard the notification in his mind and immediately retracted his foot from the God of God's kingdom. He said to the system, merge. Yi Hao looked into the infinite space ring and saw the dukedom's origin energy fragments, the Marquisate origin energy fragments, the kingdom's origin energy fragments, and the spirit nation's origin energy fragments instantly merged together. After a long time, the system notification sounded again. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 origin energy fragment. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 origin energy fragments. The host is rewarded with a special gift pack. There's a special gift pack. Use it. Yi Hao immediately used the special gift pack. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining the Peak Martial God Composite Potion. Peak Martial God Composite Potion can be used on martial gods to break through to the Peak Martial God realm. Duration of use, half an hour. Good, not bad. Yi Hao was satisfied with this reward. After all, it was free. Yi Hao looked at the infinite space ring. There were already 3 origin energy fragments and 2 origin energy fragments. Obviously, the 2 origin energy fragments were not enough to merge together. Yi Hao retracted his gaze and immediately entered the secret territory of the Empire. I wonder how strong the Emperor forces in this secret territory are. To Yi Hao's surprise, the place where he appeared was empty. However, when Yi Hao felt the martial Dao energy in the air, he knew that the forces in this secret territory should not be too weak. One had to know that there were many Emperor forces that had martial saints and even low-level martial gods. However, Yi Hao was still not afraid. He immediately summoned all of the ancient strange beasts. The ancient strange beasts immediately rushed out. What Yi Hao did not know was that this secret territory was the secret territory of the Azure Cloud Camp and the Icefield Camp. Among these 2 camps, the Azure Cloud Empire and the Icefield Empire were the 2 top empires in the Myriad Kingdom continent. These 2 empires had always been in a hostile state. Moreover, these 2 camps were the empires that had the most hope of becoming saint forces. What Yi Hao did not expect was that these 2 empires would come to a decision at this time and fight against each other in this competition. Not counting the forces in the same camp, just the Azure Cloud Empire and the Icefield Empire's Dragon Force had reached over 900 million Dragon Force points. As for the other camp's Dragon Force points, it had reached over 400,000 Dragon Force points. The 2 camps' Dragon Force points added up to more than 800,000 Dragon Force points. If Yi Hao knew about the secret territory he was in, he would definitely not be so careless as to release all of his ancient strange beasts. One had to know that the Azure Cloud Empire and the Icefield Empire were 2 of the top Emperor forces. Naturally, they would not be so simple. Icefield Emperor, it's time for us to fight to the death. At this time, on an ice field, a total of 4 billion elite soldiers were lined up neatly. The bearded and wild-looking Emperor Kang Yun was currently sitting on a 100-meter-long cloud eagle. The Azure Cloud Emperor was clad in red metal armor and held a huge red blade in his hand as he shouted arrogantly. If there was an expert present, they would be able to see that the Azure Cloud Emperor's cultivation had already reached second-order martial god realm. Even the cloud eagle he was sitting on had the strength of a first-order martial god. Roar! 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 The moment the Azure Cloud Emperor's voice fell, the 4 billion soldiers raised the ice blades in their hands and slapped their armor. They roared loudly and majestically. The roar of the 4 billion soldiers pierced through the clouds. It was enough to shake one's soul and make one's blood boil. Azure Cloud Alliance Master, in my opinion, why don't we attack directly and exterminate this group of bastard? One of the Azure Cloud Emperor Camp's emperors immediately spoke. Chapter 540. Even without seeing his face, everyone could feel a powerful wave of qi surging toward them just by hearing his voice. The emperor who had just spoken was even more flustered. Large beads of sweat instantly covered his head. The reason for that was because he could sense that the aura of death was coming for him. Ice Origin Emperor is still so overbearing. Emperor Kang Yun was the leader of the Yun Kang camp. He would not allow his ally to be bullied. That would be a slap to his face. Emperor Kang Yun released a strong energy before he finished his words. In the blink of an eye, the 2 forces collided, and it was a draw. Phew. The emperor who spoke earlier heaved a sigh of relief when he was saved. Because he was locked down by the Origin Emperor's aura, he could not even move, let alone resist. Yun Kang Emperor, you are still so arrogant. The Ice Plane Emperor wasn't angry that his attack was blocked by the Azure Cloud Emperor. Instead, he spoke with a mocking tone. What is the meaning of this? Emperor Kang Yun frowned and asked in a thunderous voice. Sigh, I was praising you when I said that your intelligence was low. Ha 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 ha. The Ice Origin Emperor sighed as he mocked with a smile on his face, causing the crowd to burst out in laughter. You dare to humiliate me? You're courting death. Emperor Kang Yun roared furiously after being humiliated by the Ice Origin Emperor. He was a hot-tempered person. How could he tolerate Emperor Kang Yun's provocation? Armies, listen up. Emperor Kang Yun raised his blade. Ha! Hearing Emperor Kang Yun's words, the 4 billion soldiers pulled out their weapons and roared. Kill them. Emperor Kang Yun pointed his blade at the Ice Origin Empire. Ignorant fool, you entered my encirclement without realizing it. Emperor Kang Yun did not show any fear or nervousness when he saw Emperor Kang Yun's actions. Instead, he laughed. Alliance leader, you are so smart. Many emperors from the Ice Origin Empire praised. Emperor Kang Yun had already set up a trap around the Yun Kang camp. He was just waiting for the Yun Kang camp to enter. Emperor Kang Yun's eyes were filled with anticipation and joy. As long as the Yun Kang camp entered his trap, he would win. He might even be able to get rid of Yun Kang. However, at this moment, the cloud eagle that Emperor Kang Yun was sitting on suddenly let out a long cry. Halt and retreat. Hearing the long cry of the cloud eagle he was riding, Yun Kang's heart instantly trembled, because he knew that the cloud eagle usually wouldn't carelessly cry out. Unless something big was going to happen. Right now, there were only 2 factions in the arcane realm, so he guessed that the cloud eagle must have discovered something from the Icefield Empire, which was why it was calling out. Could it be that they found out? That can't be. Seeing that Kang Yun's camp had stopped attacking and was retreating, the smile on the Icefield Emperor's face disappeared. The Ice Plain dynasty carefully examined the entire process. They believed that they had done every step perfectly and did not make any mistakes. But why would Kang Yun's camp suddenly retreat? The Ice Origin King's gaze immediately swept towards the emperors behind him. Looking at the cold eyes of the Ice Origin King and the murderous aura on his body, the emperors shuddered. Alliance Master, you can't be suspecting us, right? We would never betray the Icefield faction. The emperors knew what the Ice Origin King was thinking and hurriedly explained. Cloud Eagle, what's going on? Emperor Kang Yun looked at the Icefield faction suspiciously and asked the Cloud Eagle. There are many powerful auras coming towards us. We can't fight now, so we should be vigilant. The Cloud Eagle said. Hearing the Cloud Eagle's words, Yun Kang clenched the giant blade in his hand and looked towards the Icefield faction. Could it be that the Icefield Emperor invited experts? Emperor Kang Yun guessed, because it wasn't impossible. Thinking of this, Yun Kang didn't dare to be careless and immediately ordered in a low voice, raise the alert of the 3 armies. Seeing the serious expression on Yun Kang's face, the emperors didn't dare to be careless and looked around vigilantly. Alliance Master, let's fight. If we don't fight, this great opportunity will be gone. Seeing that the Kang Yun's army was gradually retreating, the emperors of the Icefield faction couldn't help but speak anxiously. Bing Yuan was also hesitant because he didn't know what was going on and why Yun Kang would suddenly retreat, so he didn't dare to be careless. He was also afraid that there was a trap. No rush, let's wait and see. Bing Yuan waved his hand. The Kang Yun's army had 4 billion soldiers. How could they retreat in such a short period of time? Bing Yuan narrowed his eyes as he looked at the Kang Yun's army. The emperors and generals beside him had anxious expressions. After waiting for a long time, the Icefield Emperor didn't see any other movements from the Kang Yun's army and finally gave the order, all armies, attack. He also didn't want to see the fat meat that was already in his mouth lose just like that. After all, who cared if Yun Kang had a trap or not? He would only know after trying. Yes. The emperors of the Icefield faction were delighted, but before they could give the order. Roar. Suddenly, the roar of a beast came from afar. The roar of the beast was filled with energy. Before anyone could see where it came from, they could feel their eardrums ringing. Wait, what's that sound? Hearing the roar, the Icefield Emperor immediately stopped the emperors from giving the order and asked anxiously. It sounds like the roar of a demonic beast. Someone said uncertainly. Roar. 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 Suddenly, the roar of the beast came again and it was continuous. The emperors identified the direction of the roar and were startled. Alliance Master, the roar seems to be coming from behind us and it seems like there are quite a few of them, they hurriedly said in a panic. Damned Yun Kang, he actually deliberately attracted my attention and attacked from behind. The Icefield Emperor was enraged. He naturally thought that the ancient demonic beasts behind him were created by Emperor Yun Kang. Because from what he saw, there were only 2 factions in the secret realm. He didn't create any demonic beasts, so it must be Emperor Yun Kang who did it. It was a pity that he still didn't know what was happening outside the secret realm. Otherwise, he would know that the Fire Dragon Empire was here. He wouldn't have jumped to the conclusion that these ancient demonic beasts were created by Emperor Yun Kang. Alliance Master, what should we do now? The emperors immediately looked at the Icefield Emperor anxiously. I didn't expect that we would be schemed against by others. The Icefield Emperor coldly snorted, since things have come to this, let's fight to the death. Pass down my order, gather the 3 armies and destroy Yun Kang's faction. Don't worry about the rear for now. The Icefield Emperor immediately ordered. From what he saw, the army in front of him was the backbone of Yun Kang's faction. As long as they destroyed Yun Kang's faction, the demonic beasts behind them would naturally be destroyed. The main thing was that he didn't know how many ancient demonic beasts were behind them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given such an order so naturally. Chapter 541. Alliance Leader, the roar of the beasts seems to be coming from the back of the Ice Plains camp. The emperors of Yun Kang's camp all had strange expressions on their faces. They all looked at Yun Kang suspiciously, guessing whether or not this was Yun Kang's trump card. Yun Kang's face was also filled with confusion because he knew that these beasts had nothing to do with him. He originally thought that these beasts were used by the Ice Plains king to deal with him. But from the looks of it, the situation didn't seem right. He couldn't figure out what was going on, and he also suspected that this was the Ice Plains king's scheme. But no matter what kind of scheme it was, there was no way he would use a group of beasts to attack his own people, unless the Ice Plains king's brain was damaged. If the Ice Plains king knew what Yun Kang was thinking, he would probably bleed from anger. Kill. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar came from all around, interrupting Yun Kang's thoughts. Alliance Leader, this is bad, we seem to be surrounded. The emperors' faces changed as they hurriedly said. What are you panicking for? Yun Kang angrily rebuked, tell our subordinates not to panic, continue to retreat. Although Yun Kang looked simple and crude, it didn't mean that he was stupid. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit in his current position. And no matter how he looked at it, he felt that today's matter was a little strange, so he didn't want to continue attacking. Follow me and break out. Yun Kang collected his thoughts and immediately retreated with the emperors. Kill. Yun Kang roared as the cloud eagle he was sitting on flapped its wings, creating 2 tornadoes that sent hundreds of people from the Ice Plains camp flying. Yun Kang himself was even more ferocious as he charged into the crowd like a ferocious tiger. The giant blade in his hand was constantly changing, and every time it was swung, it would take away countless lives. In his eyes, these elite soldiers of the Ice Plains camp were like weeds that he could slaughter at will. This wasn't because the Ice Plains camp wasn't strong enough, but because Yun Kang's battle strength was just too strong. And the more Yun Kang fought, the fewer Ice Plains soldiers around him. No one dared to fight with him, because if they did, they would just be sending themselves to their deaths. Yun Kang, what's the point of bullying these soldiers? Fight me if you have the ability. When he saw Yun Kang slaughtering unscrupulously in his own troops, he was almost torn apart in his encirclement by Yun Kang. The Ice Origin King naturally could not allow him to continue like this. He immediately rushed towards Yun Kang. Let's fight then. Do you think that this emperor is afraid of you? The gigantic blade in Yun Kang's hands reaped the lives of countless people as he stared at the Ice Origin Emperor with a bloodthirsty gaze. Come, little brat Bing Yuan. Let this emperor see if you've grown. Yun Kang roared. Waves of energy rolled out from his body as he charged at the Bing Yuan king with his giant blade. Yun Kang's movements were swift and decisive, and he did not bother to hide his martial power at all. It was as if he wanted to kill the Ice Origin king in one fell swoop. Although the 2 nations had always been in a hostile state, this was the first time that the 2 emperors had actually used their swords and spears. Seeing Yun Kang's ferocious attacks, the Ice Origin king did not show any weakness. Wielding his 3-pointed, double-edged spear, he directly met the attacks head-on. Boom! When the 2 of them collided, a shockwave spread out in all directions. Mountains and rivers immediately shattered. Countless soldiers who were unable to dodge in time were directly smashed into meat paste. The 2 emperors both retreated several steps. It was actually impossible to determine who was stronger. The two emperors got into position and began fighting again in the blink of an eye. As for the soldiers of the two camps, they were both shocked and filled with worship as they watched the two emperors fight. However, without exception, they all stayed as far away as they could even if they had to fight. They were afraid that the two emperors would accidentally injure them again. At this time, the two camps were in a deadlock. Neither side could do anything to the other. Yun Kang and Bing Yuan were even more so. The two of them were evenly matched, and it was impossible to determine a victor in a short time. Hey! It's so lively. Yi Hao suddenly appeared in the air above the two camps. When Yi Hao saw this army of close to 8 billion soldiers, he was also filled with envy. After all, this was all dragon energy. Who are you? Upon hearing Yi Hao's voice, the two emperors stopped fighting at the same time even though they were still fighting. They were on guard against the other party while looking at Yi Hao. My surname is Wu. My name is Fu Qing, Yi Hao said with a smile. Father Wu. The two emperors frowned and muttered at the same time. Lad, you are courting death. How dare you humiliate me? Go to hell. The two emperors immediately reacted. They shouted angrily and attacked Yi Hao at the same time. No matter what, they were martial gods and emperors of empires. How could they tolerate being humiliated by a lad? Therefore, the two emperors only had one goal, which was to capture this reckless lad and tear him into pieces. Why aren't you protecting me? Yi Hao shouted calmly when he saw the two emperors charging at him aggressively. Suddenly, a row of figures appeared in front of them. The two emperors immediately stopped and looked at the figures. After a glance, a thought appeared in their minds. Run. It's too late to run now. Yi Hao's mocking voice rang in their ears. The two emperors' expressions changed instantly. They were surrounded by 4 or 5 martial gods. Yun Kang, are they your men? Emperor Bing Yuan asked Emperor Yun Kang through telepathy. Look at my situation. How could they be my men? Yun Kang asked with a bitter expression. Who are you? The two emperors asked at the same time. Didn't I tell you? My name is Wu Fu Qing, Yi Hao said with a smile. The two emperors' faces turned pale. Obviously, they would not fall for Yi Hao's trick and let Yi Hao take advantage of them again. Alright, do you choose to have fun? Or do you choose to have unpleasant fun? What do you mean by pleasant fun? The two emperors immediately asked when they heard Yi Hao's question. Pleasant fun means that you will kill yourselves and save me the trouble of killing you. The two emperors' faces turned gloomy when they heard Yi Hao's words. The two emperors gritted their teeth and stared at Yi Hao. They continued to ask, what about unpleasant fun? Then I will have to trouble my men to do it personally. However, I guarantee that it will be more painful than suicide. Yi Hao continued to speak with a smile as if he did not see the two emperors' eyes. Do you think that you can do whatever you want just because you have more than 10 martial emperors? Emperor Bing Yuan looked at Yi Hao with a sneer. HMPH, you want me to kill myself? You must be dreaming. Emperor Yun Kang said with disdain. Although Yi Hao has more than 10 martial gods, they are all initial stage martial gods. On the other hand, they have nearly 8 billion soldiers. Therefore, they are not completely afraid of Yi Hao. They are confident that their soldiers will be able to kill Yi Hao and Yi Hao's men. Who said that I only have more than 10 martial gods? Yi Hao looked at the two emperors with a smile. Chapter 542. Brat, could it be that you have martial gods? Then you don't have to hide anymore. Let them come out. Yun Kang and Bing Yuan looked around vigilantly. I don't have any martial gods. Yi Hao shrugged. When the two emperors heard that there were no martial gods, they heaved a sigh of relief. But I have martial sages, Yi Hao said with a smile. Ha ha ha. Martial sages. Bring as many as you have. Yun Kang laughed arrogantly. He did not put the martial sages in his eyes at all. Bing Yuan also showed a disdainful expression because they also had many martial sages in their faction. Soldiers, attack. Yun Kang and Bing Yuan shouted furiously and ordered the soldiers of the 3 armies. Kill. When the soldiers of the 2 camps heard Bing Yuan and Yun Kang's words, they rushed towards Zhuge Liang and the others. Zhuge Liang and the others calmly faced the incoming soldiers without panicking. With just a wave of his hand, he was able to kill a large number of soldiers. Soldiers of Yun Kang's camp, listen up. Even if I die, you must attack. Otherwise, you will be punished by military law. Those who kill these martial gods will be conferred the title of Marquis and will be greatly rewarded. At this moment, Yun Kang threw caution to the wind. He only had one goal now. At worst, he would fight to the death. As a martial god, he naturally knew that martial gods were powerful but they were not invincible. As long as there were enough people, they could exhaust them to death. Bing Yuan's camp is the same. Fight to the death. Bing Yuan and Yun Kang agreed and gave the same order. Fight to the death. The soldiers of the three armies shouted and started to form a formation. They continuously rushed towards Zhuge Liang and the others. Ignorant brat, today I will show you the price of arrogance, Bing Yuan said coldly. When your men are killed, I hope you won't cry. Yun Kang looked at Yi Hao mockingly. Ha. Yi Hao looked at Yun Kang and Bing Yuan's proud faces and could not help but laugh loudly. Yun Kang and Bing Yuan immediately looked at each other and asked, "What are you laughing about?" Yi Hao summoned the heavenly dragon throne and lay down on it. He closed his eyes and ignored the two emperors. We are actually being ignored. The two martial monarchs felt like their hearts had suffered a great blow. They did not expect to be ignored by Yi Hao. Brat, don't be so arrogant. Yun Kang had a fiery temper. How could he accept Yi Hao's disregard? He picked up his giant blade and charged at Yi Hao. Kneel. Yi Hao suddenly widened his tiger-like eyes and directly let out an explosive shout. His eyes shot out a dignified light that could not be looked down upon as he looked towards Yun Kang. Yun Kang didn't know why, but when Yi Hao looked at him like this, he actually felt scared. He is merely a martial emperor. Why would I be afraid of him? After seeing Yi Hao's cultivation, Yun Kang immediately threw the fear in his heart to the back of his mind. Die. Yun Kang's hand no longer stopped moving, charging straight for Yi Hao's head. It looked like it was going to chop Yi Hao and the heavenly dragon throne in half. Heavenly dragon defense. Yi Hao shouted when he saw that Yun Kang was still attacking. Roar. Suddenly, the ordinary-looking heavenly dragon throne suddenly shot out a rainbow-colored light, and a rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's shadow appeared out of nowhere. The rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's shadow immediately coiled in front of Yi Hao. A dragon's roar resounded through the heavens and earth. What is this? Looking at the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's shadow in front of him, the Bingyuan king's heart skipped a beat. But Yun Kang did not care. What the hell is this? Break. Boom. The giant blade in Yun Kang's hand slashed at the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's head. The Bingyuan king looked at Yun Kang nervously. He wanted to see if Yun Kang could break through the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's defense. Achem. When the giant blade in his hand slashed at the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon's body, the scene that Yun Kang imagined of the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon collapsing did not happen. Instead, a huge impact came from his arms, causing his arms to feel numb. Kneel. Yi Hao suddenly shouted, as if he had already expected this to happen. As soon as Yi Hao finished speaking, the rainbow-colored gigantic dragon opened its mouth and roared as it charged at Yun Kang. Boom. The rainbow-colored dragon smashed into Yun Kang's body. Yun Kang's expression immediately changed, and the giant blade in his hand was sent flying. Fart. Yun Kang vomited a mouthful of blood, but he quickly stabilized himself. Clenching his teeth, he unwillingly stood up. Fuck, I don't believe it. Yun Kang roared. Another weapon appeared in his hand. But this time, the rainbow-colored dragon didn't even wait for him to attack. It directly pressed down on his head. Yun Kang frowned. The pressure from the rainbow-colored dragon was causing his legs to lose control. I swear I won't kneel even if I die, roared Yun Kang sinisterly. At the same time, his weapon fiercely stabbed at the rainbow-colored dragon's body. Heavenly spike slash. Yun Kang roared in anger. The martial arts power around him instantly surged. The martial arts power in his body gathered at the tip of his weapon. The heavenly spike slash was a low-tier heaven-class martial skill. By relying on it, Yun Kang had killed countless experts stronger than himself. But the heavenly spike slash consumed a considerable amount of martial energy. With his current cultivation, he could only use it 3 times in a short period of time. Originally, he had been planning on using the heavenly spike slash to deal with the Ice Origin Emperor. He hadn't expected the rainbow-colored dragon to force him to use it ahead of time. How powerful. I didn't expect him to have such a trump card. Seeing Yun Kang's heavenly spike slash, the Ice Origin Emperor's heart pounded. Scram! Yun Kang roared once more. His weapon once more attacked the rainbow-colored dragon's body. Seeing the heavenly spike slash, the rainbow-colored dragon no longer underestimated Yun Kang. It also roared furiously. In the blink of an eye, martial energy exploded like a bomb. The color of the sky changed, and even the ground caved in several hundred meters. Yi Hao and the Ice Origin Emperor immediately looked at the rainbow-colored dragon and Yun Kang. They saw that the rainbow-colored dragon's image had become much more transparent. It was clear that the rainbow-colored dragon's strength had dropped by more than a level. As for Yun Kang, he wasn't much better off. His armor had shattered, and even the weapon in his hand was gone. Yun Kang's hair was disheveled, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Ice Origin, why aren't you doing anything? Are you waiting to reap the benefits? Yun Kang looked angrily at the Ice Origin Emperor. Hearing Yun Kang's words, the Ice Origin Emperor immediately felt embarrassed. After all, Yi Hao was their common enemy. He couldn't let Yun Kang deal with him alone. Furthermore, Yun Kang's injuries weren't light. It was time for him to make a move. Yun Kang, what are you saying? Rest for a while. Watch me. After saying that, the Ice Origin Emperor raised his 3-point, double-edged spear and charged at the rainbow-colored dragon. Ice Origin Snow Seal. The Ice Origin Emperor didn't dare to hold back. He immediately used his trump card. He knew that if he didn't use his trump card, he would be looking for trouble. Chapter 543. The Icefield Emperor's Icefield Seal was also a heaven-class low-tier martial technique. This martial technique was so powerful that if a person's level was much lower than the Icefield Emperor's, their blood would instantly freeze within the range of the Icefield Seal. In serious cases, their soul would be frozen. If a martial artist's blood was frozen, they would lose their ability to move. If their soul was frozen, they could only face death. From this, one could see how powerful the Icefield Seal was. Seeing the Icefield Emperor's Icefield Seal, Yi Hao couldn't help but feel that the surrounding air was gradually becoming colder. It's actually snowing. Yi Hao looked at the sky in disbelief. There were actually snowflakes floating in the air. This martial technique is not bad. Yi Hao was also very envious of the Icefield Emperor's martial technique. If it can be dropped later, that would be even better. Little 7, can you still hold on? If you can't, then retreat. Yi Hao couldn't help but look at the rainbow dragon worriedly. Roar. The rainbow dragon roared in defiance, indicating that it could do it. Roar. The rainbow dragon roared again. Suddenly, changes occurred in front of the rainbow dragon. That is, rainbow dragon aura? Yi Hao guessed when he saw the aura of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning appear in front of the rainbow dragon. Yi Hao knew that the rainbow dragon had its own martial technique, but he didn't expect that the rainbow dragon's aura would correspond to metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning. 7 different types of attacks. This is going to be interesting. Seeing this scene, Yi Hao laughed in his heart. The power of snow versus the power of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning. It was hard to tell which was stronger. Chumph, you're still too weak. The Icefield Emperor was a little surprised when he felt the power of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and lightning. After all, there were 7 different types of power. It was a little too messy. Only fire could restrain his Icefield Seal. But what was this little bit of fire? It wasn't enough for him to extinguish it. Seal. The Icefield Emperor pointed his spear, and the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. Even the scattered snow turned into goose feathers. And if you think that this is just ordinary snow, then you are gravely mistaken. Snow fell on the soldiers below, instantly turning them into ice sculptures. Their auras disappeared, and they did not even have the chance to dodge. Most of the snowflakes fell to the ground, and the ground was instantly frozen. It could be seen that the temperature of the snow was terrifying. 1. 2 types. 3. The 7 nature powers of the rainbow dragon were instantly frozen by the snowflakes. The first to freeze was the water, followed by the wind, which was directly converted into the Ice Origin Emperor's own power. Ice and snow combined with cold wind. Was there even a need to think about that kind of feeling? Then, the metal, wood, earth, and thunder were all frozen in the air by the snowflakes. Only a huge fireball was left, and it began to tremble in the air, looking like it would be extinguished at any moment. Let's see how long you can last. I'll definitely turn you into an ice sculpture, the Ice Origin King thought gleefully as he saw that victory was in sight. Ha! As he shouted, more power surged out of his body, turning into palm-sized snowflakes that fell on the fireball. Every time a snowflake fell, the fireball would decrease by a little. Little 7, can you do it? Seeing Little 7 at a disadvantage, Yi Hao anxiously asked. If Little 7 was really turned into an ice sculpture, it would not be fun. Roar. The rainbow dragon did not panic. It roared at Yi Hao, giving Yi Hao a look that said, let's see how it performs. Does Little 7 have other ultimate moves? Seeing that 6 of the 7 nature powers of the rainbow dragon had been frozen, the remaining fireball was in imminent danger. Yi Hao curiously guessed. Die for me, foolish dragon, the Ice Origin King said disdainfully. At the same time, he flicked his spear, and more snowflakes fell on the fireball. Roar. Suddenly, just as the fireball was about to be extinguished, the rainbow dragon swung its tail, instantly destroying the snowflakes that had sealed 6 of its powers. As the rainbow-colored dragon swung its tail, the frost instantly dissipated, and the 6 sealed powers regained their freedom. Seeing this scene, the Ice Origin King did not panic. Because even if these powers were unsealed, they would not be able to cause any harm to him. More importantly, he could seal these powers at any time. As long as he sealed all the powers, he could easily seal the rainbow dragon and attack Yi Hao. Seal them again. Roar. Seeing all the snowflakes falling on his 7 powers, the rainbow dragon roared proudly. He was about to use his ultimate move. The aura of the 7 powers that were gradually being sealed suddenly changed. This is. Seeing the 7 powers changing, the aura of the rainbow dragon kept changing. Boom. 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 Suddenly, the 6 powers that were about to be sealed exploded continuously. As for those 6 powers, they actually all turned into fireballs, emitting a violent heat. The snowflakes turned into water and evaporated, disappearing into the air. This. Upon seeing the sight before him, the Glacier Plain God Emperor felt as if a tsunami had struck his heart, as if he had suffered a huge blow. How is this possible? The Ice Origin King still could not believe what he was seeing. He had already used his martial technique. How could it change? There were clearly 7 powers. How could they all turn into one? And the 7 fireballs in front of him could not be faked. Even if it was unbelievable, it had happened. The Ice Origin King could feel the cold air around him gradually warming up. Waves of heat blew past his face. PH, so what if it's a fireball? I can still freeze it. The Ice Origin monarch roared as he recovered from his shock. Similarly, he was also unconvinced. After all, as an emperor, he naturally had his pride. Following the Ice Origin King's roar, the power of the martial path in his body rumbled and surged out, turning into snowflakes. And the surrounding heat finally stabilized, no longer rising. At this moment, the Ice Origin King had already used all his power. The veins on his head were bulging, and beads of sweat were dripping down his forehead. This was the sweat of exhaustion, not caused by the heat. The Ice Origin King used all his power, and the cold air once again took over. Controlling the snowflakes, the Ice Origin King pressed down on the 7 fireballs. And under the Ice Origin King's attack, the 7 fireballs began to tremble weakly. Ice Origin King, hold on a little longer. Just one more step. Seeing that the Ice Origin King had already gained the upper hand, Yun Kang clutched his chest and shouted excitedly. Chapter 544. Yi Hao looked at the rainbow dragon anxiously. He was already prepared to retrieve the rainbow dragon. The rainbow dragon was the spirit of the sky dragon throne. If the rainbow dragon was destroyed, the sky dragon throne would be useless. Bing Yuan, kill it. Kill this beast. Seeing the rainbow dragon at a disadvantage, Yun Kang shouted anxiously. After all, the rainbow dragon had caused him a lot of damage. He wanted to pull out the rainbow dragon's tendons. Most importantly, he would be able to deal with Yi Hao after killing the seven-colored dragon. Looking at Yi Hao, who was sitting on the sky dragon throne, Yun Kang's eyes were filled with killing intent. He gritted his teeth in hatred. Seal. Bing Yuan shouted. Instantly, all the energy in Bing Yuan's snow seal pressed down on the 7 fireballs. The flames on the 7 fireballs were constantly changing. Roar. The rainbow dragon suddenly opened its mouth wide and sucked hard. It actually wanted to suck the 7 fireballs into its mouth. Bing Yuan was also stunned by the rainbow dragon's actions. The rainbow dragon was relying on the 7 fireballs to hold on and fight against him. At this critical moment, the rainbow dragon had actually retrieved the fireballs. Wasn't that courting death? Mate, since you're in a hurry to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Bing Yuan sneered. At the same time, he attacked the rainbow dragon. Under Bing Yuan's control, all the snow and ice in the area attacked the rainbow dragon. In the blink of an eye, all the snow and ice covered the rainbow dragon. Ha ha ha, stupid thing. Bing Yuan laughed proudly when he saw the rainbow dragon covered in snow and ice. He couldn't see the rainbow dragon's appearance. He didn't expect the rainbow dragon to give up at this critical moment. Otherwise, he wouldn't have won so easily. Bing Yuan, you did well. Yun Kang praised with a smile. Kid, if you kneel and beg for mercy now, you might suffer less. Bing Yuan smiled at Yun Kang. Then, he looked at Yi Hao proudly. Now that the rainbow dragon was gone, Zhuge Liang and the others couldn't spare any time to help. Therefore, in their eyes, Yi Hao had already become someone they could slaughter at will. Brat, didn't you tell me to kneel down? Aren't I standing still? Why don't you kneel down before me? Yun Kang was also looking at Yi Hao with a cold smile on his face. Just as he finished speaking, he was about to attack Yi Hao. Bang! Roar! Just as Yun Kang was about to attack, a loud noise came from the 7-colored dragon. A huge fireball appeared where the 7-colored dragon was. All of the ice and snow melted in the blink of an eye. A dragon roar could be heard. Pu. Beside the rainbow dragon, the Ice Origin King spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying like a broken kite. As for Yun Kang, who was about to make a move on Yi Hao, his eyes suddenly narrowed and he quickly reacted in his heart. Not good, run. Yun Kang glanced at the giant 7-colored dragon. Without hesitation, he immediately fled. Rumble. Suddenly, the huge fireball beside the rainbow dragon smashed towards Yun Kang. This fireball seemed to be the amalgamation of all the previous fireballs. It was so huge that it seemed like the entire world was in a furnace. In the blink of an eye, the ground started to crack. Even though Yi Hao was a 7th-order martial emperor, he could feel the heat in the air. Heh! Fight! Looking at the fireball coming towards him, Yun Kang made up his mind. Since he couldn't escape, he might as well give it a try. Sky Spike Slash! Yun Kang shouted. He placed his weapon in front of him and charged towards the fireball. He didn't believe that the 7-colored dragon could defy the heavens. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Yun Kang and the huge fireball collided. Instantly, sparks flew in all directions. The huge fireball burst into countless smaller fireballs that flew in all directions. Heh! Yun Kang shouted again. He held his weapon and blocked the huge fireball. The two of them were in a deadlock. The weapon in Yun Kang's hand was burned red by the scorching flames. This was an Emperor-grade weapon. If it was a weapon below the Emperor grade, it would have been melted into molten iron and turned into nothingness. Yun Kang wasn't any better. He didn't know if it was because of the heat or because of the flames, but his entire body had turned red. Beads of sweat continuously appeared on his body. At the same time, he was being dried up. Catcher. Suddenly, the weapon in Yun Kang's hand made a cracking sound. This meant that the weapon in Yun Kang's hand was on the verge of destruction. Not good. Yun Kang's heart tightened. Looking at the weapon that was about to be destroyed, he was in a dilemma. Quickly, save His Majesty. Seeing that Yun Kang was in trouble, the soldiers in Yun Kang's camp immediately shouted. Instantly, countless people flew towards the fireball. PFFF. Bang. Ah. As a result, many soldiers were seriously injured by the fireball before they could even get close. Some were even burned to ashes. However, they could see that the fireball had weakened a lot. Seeing that the fireball had weakened, Yun Kang was relieved. He immediately shouted to the soldiers, "All of you, continue to attack." With Yun Kang's order, even more soldiers rushed towards the fireball. Roar. Looking at the soldiers rushing towards it, the rainbow-colored dragon let out a disdainful roar. Boom. Suddenly, the huge fireball exploded and turned into countless smaller fireballs, shooting in all directions. PFFF. 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 The fireballs accurately shot into the bodies of all the soldiers. The weaker soldiers immediately started to catch fire from within their bodies. They were burned to ashes. Retreat. Yun Kang didn't expect that the fireball would suddenly explode. The moment the fireball exploded, he immediately shouted. Hiss. Yun Kang frantically retreated. However, his back was still hit by the fireball. Even his armor was melted by the fireball. His back was a mess of flesh and blood. It was pitch black. If one were to smell it carefully, they would definitely be able to smell the smell of burnt flesh. It hurts. Feeling the intense pain on his back, Yun Kang grimaced in pain. He immediately took out a recovery pill and swallowed it. When he turned around, he saw that his back had turned into a sea of fire. As for those soldiers that rushed towards him, other than himself, they were all burned to nothingness. Little bastard, I'm not done with you. Yun Kang looked at Yi Hao with resentment and roared furiously. Because his current sorry state was all caused by Yi Hao. After the rainbow-colored dragon used the rainbow-colored dragon might, it became even weaker. It let out a low roar at Yi Hao and shot into the heavenly dragon throne. Little Seven's performance was not bad. Yi Hao praised as he looked at the sea of fire on the ground. He didn't expect that the rainbow-colored dragon phantom was actually so powerful. It was actually able to defeat Yun Kang and Bing Yuan. Furthermore, the two of them were injured to different degrees. This had already exceeded his expectations. Furthermore, the explosion of the huge fireball had actually increased his dragon power by nearly 1 million. In other words, the might of the fireball had actually killed more than 1 million soldiers. Chapter 545. Ahem, Yun Kang, what happened? Bing Yuan had just woken up from his coma. He looked at the sea of fire below him and asked in shock. Bing Yuan looked at Yun Kang and realized that Yun Kang's body was covered in burn marks. Even the domineering armor on his body had lost its former elegance and was now beautiful. Looking at Yun Kang now, he no longer looked like an emperor who had conquered the battlefield. He looked no different from a beggar. Fortunately, the rainbow dragon had disappeared. This allowed him to heave a sigh of relief. Just now, the rainbow dragon spat out a huge fireball and severely injured you. Yun Kang immediately told Bing Yuan what had happened. Since the rainbow dragon has disappeared, what are we waiting for? Let's join forces and kill this little bastard. Bing Yuan looked at Yi Hao with murderous eyes. The two of you, the feeling of being burned must be terrible. Yi Hao ignored the murderous looks in their eyes and asked with a smile. Little bastard, I'll kill you. Feeling the burning pain all over his body, Yun Kang was furious. Furthermore, Yi Hao had dared to provoke him. Did he really think that he was someone to be trifled with? Don't be in such a hurry. You haven't seen a good show yet. Yi Hao waved his hand. A good show? Bing Yuan frowned and looked at Yi Hao in confusion. Little bastard, what other tricks are you trying to play? Yun Kang stared at Yi Hao and roared without holding back. Look at your dragon power, Yi Hao said with a smile. What's wrong with our dragon power? The two emperors looked at their dragon power suspiciously after hearing Yi Hao's words. How is this possible? Where did my dragon power go? Little bastard, what did you do? The two emperors suddenly shouted in agitation. The reason for that was because they discovered that their dragon power had decreased substantially. Yun Kang's dragon power had decreased by 1 billion. That was 1 billion. Even a top empire only had that much dragon power. Yun Kang's empire only had 40 dragon power in total. In the blink of an eye, it had decreased by a quarter. How could he accept this? As for the Icefield faction, it was even more terrifying. Their dragon power dropped by 2 billion, which was half of their total. Bing Yuan and Yun Kang felt like they were going crazy as they stared at Yi Hao crazily. Have you ever experienced despair? Yi Hao suddenly asked. Bing Yuan and Yun Kang were stunned. They didn't know what Yi Hao meant. The two of them stared at Yi Hao. Squeak tilde squeak tilde squeak tilde. Suddenly, the cry of the heaven-devouring rat could be heard. What was that sound? Hearing heaven-swallowing rat's voice, Bing Yuan and Yun Kang vigilantly picked up their weapons and looked around. However, with just a glance, his expression changed drastically. At some point, countless rats had appeared around them, drooling as they stared at them. Just a bunch of damned rats. What's there to be afraid of? Yun Kang coldly snorted. Ice Principal swallowed his saliva and reminded, look at their cultivation. What's wrong with their cultivation? Earlier, Yun Kang didn't check the heaven-swallowing rat's cultivation. He listened to Bing Yuan and directly shouted, Peak martial saint, as martial gods, they shouldn't be so agitated when they saw martial saints. But now, it was hard for them to remain calm. There were several thousand heaven-swallowing rats. I don't believe it. Yun Kang still couldn't believe that Yi Hao had so many peak martial saint-level rats. He immediately looked at the other rats. The more he looked, the more frightened and powerless he became. Because, without exception, all 4,000 heaven-swallowing rats were peak martial saint level. 2 second-order martial gods who were seriously injured were fighting against 4,000 peak martial saint level heaven-swallowing rats. Who was stronger and who was weaker could be seen at a glance. Little ones, play with them. Looking at Bing Yuan and Yun Kang's panicked expressions, Yi Hao said to the heaven-swallowing rats. Squeak squeak. The heaven-swallowing rats immediately responded to Yi Hao and surrounded Bing Yuan and Yun Kang from all directions. Yun Kang, no need to panic. The heaven-swallowing rats also have weak spots. Their defense is trash. As long as we cooperate well, it's not impossible to kill this group of disgusting beasts. Bing Yuan cautiously looked at the rats around them and said in a low voice. I should be able to use Icy Snow Seal again. In a while, you use Skythorn Slash. You must seize the opportunity. Bing Yuan and Yun Kang didn't dare to be careless, cautiously looking at the heaven-swallowing rats. Icy Snow Seal. Suddenly, Bing Yuan shouted loudly and used a martial skill, Bing Yuan Shui Seal. In an instant, the surrounding air suddenly dropped. Roar tilde suddenly, a dragon's roar sounded. Bing Yuan's heart suddenly panicked and he looked back in fear. It would have been better if he didn't look. Once he looked, his martial skill was actually interrupted. How could the heaven-swallowing rats let go of this opportunity? They instantly opened their mouths, revealing sharp teeth and biting. You want to fight with me? You're still too inexperienced. Yi Hao said with a proud smile. At the same time, he looked at the giant dragon beside him. Master, that group of rats are all peak martial saints. Can you give me a pill as well? Looking at the heaven-swallowing rat's cultivation, the giant dragon said covetously. His cultivation had already recovered to martial emperor level. However, if he wanted to recover to peak martial saint level, he would still need some time. Yi Hao glanced at the giant dragon. In his heart, he wasn't too willing to give the giant dragon the peak martial saint pill. This was because there was only one disadvantage to peak martial saints. That was, after eating the peak martial saint pill, they wouldn't be able to continue cultivating in the future. In Yi Hao's opinion, the giant dragon's potential was far beyond peak martial saint level. You can give it to him. The dragon race has a special physique and has a strong immunity. Peak Marshal Saint Pill doesn't have any restrictions for him. Just as Yi Hao was hesitating, the system in his mind suddenly said, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" When he heard the system's words, Yi Hao was overjoyed. However, he still complained. However, the system seemed to have automatically omitted this complaint. Once again, it fell into silence and ignored Yi Hao. Here. Since there were no restrictions, Yi Hao immediately took out a Peak Marshal Saint Pill and gave it to the giant dragon. "Thank you, Master." The giant dragon sniffed the Peak Marshal Saint Pill and was overjoyed. Then, he swallowed it. Roar. The giant dragon suddenly roared into the sky. His roar was filled with joy. "Master, my cultivation has finally recovered." The giant dragon cried out excitedly. "I'll let you have a taste of my power," the giant dragon said excitedly as he looked at Bing Yuan and Yun Kang, who were fighting with the heaven-swallowing rats. Then, like a missile, the giant dragon extended his sharp claws and charged toward the two. Bang! The two, who were already having a hard time dealing with the attack, were instantly sent flying. Fart! The two spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 546. No wonder it's one of the top demonic beasts in the 10,000 countries continent. Its fighting strength is indeed powerful. Yi Hao looked at the strength that the dragon had unleashed. It was definitely comparable to any beginner-level martial god. Not to mention Bing Yuan and Yun Kang, they were already seriously injured. Even if they weren't seriously injured, they probably wouldn't be a match for the dragon. Squeak squeak. Seeing that Yun Kang and Bing Yuan were seriously injured and unable to get up, the heaven-devouring rats immediately pounced on them. "No. No. Get lost. You bunch of dirty rats, don't bite me. I'll kill you bunch of damn rats. Ignorant kid, I, Yun Kang, will not live under the same sky as you." Yun Kang and Bing Yuan were constantly being bitten by the rats. The pain on their bodies caused them to constantly curse. At this moment, the most ruthless person in their hearts was Yi Hao. Because all of this was caused by Yi Hao. Gradually, Bing Yuan and Yun Kang's body were completely divided up by the heaven-devouring rats. "Kill." Yi Hao immediately ordered the heaven-devouring rats. The heaven-devouring rats immediately shot towards the army below. "Not good, His Majesty is dead. Not good, Alliance leader is dead." Many soldiers saw Bing Yuan and Yun Kang being killed with their own eyes and shouted in panic. "What? His Majesty is dead. Then what should we do? Might as well commit suicide." At this moment, the atmosphere of Yun Kang and Bing Yuan being killed gradually spread throughout the army. Everyone's mood was terrifyingly gloomy. "Haha, it's already 450,000. Yi Hao looked at his dragon power and saw that it was still rising rapidly. One must know that this 450,000 dragon power could be considered a mid-tier sacred rank force in the 10,000 countries continent. There were only a few mid-tier sacred rank forces in the 10,000 countries continent, and there were less than 20 of them. And Yi Hao had squeezed into a mid-tier sacred rank force through the 10,000 countries ceremony. At this moment, outside the secret realm. What is the origin of this fire dragon empire? Is it trying to change the structure of the 10,000 countries continent? It's already 450,000 dragon power. I remember that it was only 14 dragon power at the beginning. And there are only 3 people left on the empire ranking list. He actually took down 6 of them in a row. At this moment, everyone was looking at the incomparably dazzling chaotic entry list in the air. Each and every one of them felt their hearts palpitating. This was a fear of the unknown. They didn't know what the Fire Dragon Empire was, and they didn't know what would happen if the empire rankings disappeared. At this moment, they could only observe the movements of the Fire Dragon Empire through the dragon energy on the Chaos leaderboard. Look, the Nation of Gods list is gone. Just when everyone was worried about the future, the Nation of Gods leaderboard suddenly disappeared. Did the Fire Dragon Empire enter the Holy Kingdom? Everyone was guessing. Impossible. The Fire Dragon Empire is still in the Imperial Kingdom's secret realm. Someone immediately retorted. Everyone looked at Yun Kang and Bing Yuan's rankings. Sure enough, The battle had not ended yet. Then why did the nation of gods list disappear? Everyone was confused. So it's this tiring to slaughter. Yi Hao sat on the heavenly dragon throne and yawned. It had been almost 10 days, and the soldiers of Yun Kang and Bing Yuan's camp were still not finished. After all, there were 5 billion soldiers. Even if the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats were fighting day and night, there were still 2 billion soldiers left. But this was all dragon energy. Even if there were another 10 billion, he would still accept it. And now, his dragon energy had broken through to 700,000. Not to mention others, even he himself was deeply surprised. Looks like it'll take a few more days. Yi Hao heard the beast roars coming from all around. At this moment, Yun Kang and Bing Yuan's people were no longer charging blindly. Most of them had already started to run. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so tiring. It's finally over. After another 7 or 8 days, all the soldiers were finally slaughtered. Yi Hao finally let out a breath of relief. Ding dong, ancient mutated beast dead. Ding dong, ancient mutated beast dead. Ding dong, sky-devouring rat dead. Ding dong, sky-devouring rat dead. Ding dong, ancient mutated beast dead. Just as Yi Hao was about to call back all the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats, the system's notifications suddenly rang out continuously. What? Hearing this notification, Yi Hao was shocked. At the same time, he was puzzled. One had to know that the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats had also been killed when they were slaughtering Yun Kang and Bing Yuan's soldiers. But those were only a few, and only one would die every few days. Now, it had rung more than 10 times. Most importantly, the Yun Kang and Bing Yuan soldiers of this world had all been killed. How could the ancient mutated beasts and sky-devouring rats have died for no reason? There are strong people approaching. The host is advised to leave quickly. There are dangers approaching. The host is advised to leave quickly. At this moment, the system's notifications suddenly rang out urgently. Yi Hao ignored the system. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the people in the distance. You must be the master of that group of ancient mutated beast. Soon, a group of people landed in front of Yi Hao. The leader was actually a very young man. Zhen Wei looked at Yi Hao arrogantly. Boy, what a big pill. Why don't you kneel down when you see God? Zhen Wei. A guard behind Zhen Wei also didn't put Yi Hao in his eyes. Because they were from the Zhentian Divine Kingdom, one of the 4 divine kingdoms in the Myriad Kingdom continent. Moreover, Zhen Wei was the crown prince of the Zhentian Divine Kingdom. In the Myriad Kingdom continent, he was definitely a supreme existence. This chair is not bad. I want it. You can scram now. Zhen Wei didn't even look at Yi Hao, as if Yi Hao couldn't enter his eyes at all. He directly said in a commanding tone. It was as if it was an honor for Yi Hao to give him the heavenly dragon throne. Yi Hao. Hearing Zhen Wei's tone, Yi Hao frowned. He didn't expect Zhen Wei to be so insolent. He hadn't even settled the score of killing his ancient mutated beasts for no reason. He even dared to speak to him in a commanding tone. Now, he even wanted to snatch his heavenly dragon throne. If this matter happened to a normal person, they would be angry, let alone Yi Hao. Boy, did you hear that? Hurry up and thank God. Zhen Wei. The guard beside Zhen Wei didn't wait for Yi Hao to speak and said the same thing. Who do you think you are? Yi Hao looked at the guard contemptuously. You're just a dog. You barked before your master did. You have no eyesight. What did you say? The guard seemed to have heard wrongly and couldn't help but shout in exasperation. If you have the ability, say it again. Although he was a guard, he was a member of the Zhentian Divine Kingdom and a favorite of God Zhen Wei. Not to mention others, even the leader of the Holy Dynasty would have to give him some face when they saw him. Chapter 547. Zhen Wei's face also became ugly. As the saying goes, you have to look at the owner before you hit the dog. Yi Hao ignored the guards like this, which was also ignoring himself. Zhen Wei's face became gloomy, and he said in a deep voice, "Teach him a lesson for me." Behind Zhen Wei, A group of mid-level martial god guards immediately rolled up their sleeves and walked towards Yi Hao with a sneer. They didn't even take out their weapons because in their eyes, Yi Hao was not worth their weapons at all. Zhen Wei stood proudly on the side. In their opinion, in this world, there was no one they couldn't afford to offend, and no one dared to offend them. And Yi Hao dared to not give them face, so he must pay a painful price. Courting death. Zhen Wei was arrogant, but Yi Hao was also not to be trifled with. These people around Zhen Wei were all around the 5th or 6th order martial god. The magical beasts were too scattered, and it was too late to call them back. After so many days of fighting, each of them was weak. Even if they came back, they were not the opponents of these guards. Needless to say, Zhuge Liang did not have the advantage in numbers at all. It was the same in terms of cultivation realm. But Yi Hao still did not panic because he had the peak martial god composite potion. This was the system's reward for fusing the origin fragments. He did not expect to use it so soon. Give it to Zhuge Liang. Yi Hao thought for a moment and decided to give the potion to Zhuge Liang. Thinking of this, Yi Hao immediately summoned Zhuge Liang. Haha, idiot, a 3rd order martial god trash wants to deal with my mid-level martial god subordinates. Seeing Yi Hao summon Zhuge Liang, Zhen Wei laughed loudly. Zhen Wei mocked Yi Hao loudly. At this moment, in his eyes, Yi Hao was like an idiot. Kill this trash first, then deal with that kid. Where did so many powerhouses come from? Zhuge Liang was summoned, and the usual calmness on his face disappeared. Zhuge Liang looked nervously at Yi Hao, looking for help. Because he knew that these people did not come with good intentions, and he was not their opponent. After all, he was only a low-level martial god, and the other party was a group of mid-level martial god. Master, I'll hold them back. You run. Zhuge Liang could not think of a countermeasure and could only transmit his voice to Yi Hao. Why are you running? Drink this, Yi Hao said angrily. He had not expected that even his own subordinates would look down on him so much. This was not Zhuge Liang's fault. After all, the disparity in power was obvious. This is. Although Zhuge Liang did not know what the peak Einherjar compound was, he had some guesses in his heart. All Zhuge Liang immediately took the medicine and drank it. No reaction. Zhuge Liang looked at Yi Hao anxiously. When Yi Hao saw this, he felt a little guilty. Could it be that he had been tricked by the system because the peak martial god composite medicine was not effective? Kill. Suddenly, a person shouted and a circle of sharp weapons smashed towards Zhuge Liang. Seeing the incoming fist, Zhuge Liang could only vaguely see the shadow of the fist. His mind was quickly making plans and dodging routes. However, his speed could not keep up with his thoughts at all. Just as he was about to dodge, the fist had already landed on his body. Boom. With a muffled sound, Zhuge Liang was directly sent flying. Ha ha ha, trash. What a trash. You can't even withstand a single blow. The person who punched could not help but laugh proudly. At the same time, he looked at Zhen Wei respectfully, hoping that Zhen Wei would reward him. Zhen Wei was in a good mood. When he saw Zhuge Liang being sent flying, he felt that he had instantly gained face. You did well. When we go back, I will reward you greatly, Zhen Wei said with a smile. At the same time, Zhen Wei looked at Yi Hao contemptuously. Kid, you want to fight with me? Who do you think you are? Yi Hao's face was gloomy at this moment. At the same time, he contacted the system angrily. System, I need an explanation. The system was silent for a moment. This is the system's fault. It forgot to tell you the flaw of the peak martial god composite medicine. It needs a buffer time of 300 seconds. Yi Hao was even more furious. He was angry that the system did not remind him earlier. One had to know that 300 seconds was 5 minutes. These 5 minutes could kill someone. The system was silent for a moment again before it said, in order to make up for the system's mistake, the host will be rewarded with a peak martial god pill. I almost died and you only compensated me with 1 pill. Yi Hao laughed in his heart, but he still pretended to be unhappy and asked. After all, he was just angry at the beginning. The system did not tell him in advance. He did not expect the system to compensate him, but he did not expect the stingy system to really compensate him. Moreover, it was a peak martial god pill. It could be said that the system was giving him a peak martial god expert. The system will help Zhuge Liang. This is the system's greatest right. After all, this world has its own rules. There are too many restrictions on the system. If you did not obtain so much dragon power, the system would not be able to do it. Hearing the system's words, Yi Hao was already very satisfied. He was now looking forward to the system making more mistakes in the future. That way, he would be able to get some additional rewards. Cough cough. At this moment, Zhuge Liang finally got up from the ground. He looked at Yi Hao with some resentment in his eyes. He wondered if Yi Hao had tricked him and deliberately made him drink plain water so that he could get beaten up. Oh my, you can still stand up. Zhen Wei's subordinate saw Zhuge Liang stand up and walked towards him provocatively. Continue lying down for me. Zhen Wei's subordinate punched Zhuge Liang once again. Just as Zhuge Liang was about to dodge, he suddenly felt a powerful force in his body. Little Xin, don't waste time, kill him directly. Zhen Wei ordered his subordinate. Yes. Little Xin answered respectfully. He looked at Zhuge Liang with a cruel smile on his face. Bang! Just as Little Xin's fist was about to hit Zhuge Liang suddenly moved. Little Xin felt his fist become light and mist. Little Xin looked for Zhuge Liang, but he discovered that the Zhuge Liang in front of him had disappeared. Where is he? Little Xin could not believe that Zhuge Liang had disappeared. He did not believe that he could not hit Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang was clearly a third-order martial god trash. How could he dodge his attack? This was simply inconceivable. Even Zhen Wei was taken aback. Suddenly, he felt a gust of wind blowing behind him. Zhen Wei was startled and wanted to run away. I advise you not to move. Zhuge Liang's voice suddenly sounded in Zhen Wei's ears. Zhen Wei's face turned ugly. Hurry up and activate my god's son Zhen Wei. Arrogant brat, do you know who you are holding in your hands? Brat, I advise you to kneel down and admit your mistake. It's not too late now. Chapter 548. Kid, I advise you to get your dog to let go of me. Zhen Wei didn't panic. He knew that it was useless to talk to Zhuge Liang, so he ordered Yi Hao directly. Why should I? Yi Hao asked with a smile. Because of my status. Zhen Wei said haughtily. In his opinion, his status was a golden ticket to avoid death. After all, he was the crown prince of the Zhentian divine nation, one of the 4 divine nations. Who would dare to provoke him? Is that so? Yi Hao got up and walked to Zhen Wei's side. Zhen Wei was still smiling. He believed that Yi Hao would let him go respectfully. However, he wouldn't let Yi Hao go. No one had ever made him so unhappy and dared to capture him. This was not giving him any face. If he didn't give him any face, he wouldn't give the Zhentian divine nation any face. The consequences would be severe. Get your dog to chop off his own hands and offer up your chair with both hands. If you say no, I'm in a good mood and might even spare your life. Zhen Wei ordered Yi Hao. Spare your ancestors. How dare you act tough in front of me? Yi Hao's smile faded when he heard Zhen Wei's words. He raised his fist and swung it at Zhen Wei's head. Do you really think this is your home? You don't care about the occasion when you act tough. Why don't you take a look at whose hands you are? God's son. I think you're more like a lunatic. Yi Hao's fist was aimed at Zhen Wei's head without any aim. Recalling Zhen Wei's arrogant and insolent appearance, Yi Hao still felt unsatisfied. He directly used his leg to kick Zhen Wei. Zhen Wei was completely stunned. His subordinates were also stunned. Even Zhuge Liang was stunned. Zhen Wei hadn't expected that Yi Hao would actually dare to hit him. Moreover, it was a violent beating and a punch to his face. Before this, he had never been hit by anyone. Not even a single hair on his body had been hurt. He had been born with a silver spoon in his mouth for so long. Everyone who saw him treated him well. But today, he was actually beaten up, and by a little brat at that. Therefore, at this moment, Zhen Wei fell into a state of confusion. He didn't even resist and just stared blankly at Yi Hao. As for Zhen Wei's subordinates, their jaws dropped in shock. The divine son has been beaten. We're finished. We're dead for sure this time. Who is this brat? How dare he hit our divine son? Doesn't he know how terrifying the Zhenwei divine nation is? Even the holy dynasty is an existence that can be easily overturned. Everyone watched this scene quietly. It was not that they did not want to rescue Zhenwei, but they were afraid that if they provoked Yi Hao, he would kill Zhenwei. Zhuge Liang did not expect his lord to have such a violent side. Aren't you, Zhenwei, arrogant and conceited? I specialize in beating up people like you who act pretentious and conceited. The more Yi Hao beat him, the more he vented his anger. When he saw that Zhenwei didn't know how to resist and Yi Hao stopped, he wondered if Zhenwei had been beaten silly. Hey, stop acting pretentious. Yi Hao slapped Zhenwei again to wake him up. You actually dared to hit me? At this moment, Zhenwei revealed an expression of disbelief. Zhenwei's subordinates blushed with shame. Yi Hao didn't dare to hit him. He directly beat him up. Brat, let's talk nicely. Let go of our divine son. Zhenwei's subordinates swallowed their saliva and said in a low voice. Yi Hao glanced at Zhenwei's subordinates. Seeing Yi Hao's sharp eyes, everyone panicked. Because this kind of gaze was much more intimidating than Zhenwei's usual gaze. None of them dared to look at Yi Hao and quickly lowered their heads. All of you, kneel down, Yi Hao directly said to everyone in a commanding tone. What? Are you crazy? Everyone looked at Yi Hao in shock. What a joke. He actually asked them to kneel down. Who were they? They were from the Zhentian divine nation. Other than the Zhentian divine emperor and Zhenwei, only others would kneel to them. Who else would they kneel to? But Yi Hao, this arrogant and reckless brat, actually asked them to kneel down. Kill him for me. At this moment, Zhenwei had finally recovered from the shock of being beaten up. Then, he felt a burning pain on his cheeks. His heart was burning with anger. He roared furiously and his eyes were filled with killing intent. I advise you to be obedient. Be careful that I don't cut off your flesh and feed it to the rat. Yi Hao took out a dagger and slapped Zhenwei's face. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhenwei looked at the sky-devouring rat and couldn't help but snort coldly. The words that were in his throat were forcefully swallowed back down. Even if this was a secret realm, it was still a nightmarish experience. He didn't want to experience it. Why aren't you kneeling down? Do you want to see your divine son being eaten by rats? Seeing the hesitation on everyone's face and the anger in many of their eyes, Yi Hao continued to threaten. Everyone was unwilling to kneel down to Yi Hao because it would damage the reputation of Zhentian Kingdom. Brat, think carefully. If you want us to kneel down, the consequences are not something you can bear. One of them gritted his teeth and threatened. If Zhenwei wasn't in Yi Hao's hands, he would have torn Yi Hao into pieces. It seems like you have a lot of nonsense. Then don't blame me for being impolite. After saying that, Yi Hao took out his dagger and slashed at Zhenwei. No. Seeing Yi Hao's action, many people shouted in unison. Hiss. Ah. Zhenwei let out a scream. Blood immediately gushed out from Zhenwei's side. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill everyone in your kingdom. The pain almost made Zhenwei lose his mind and he kept shouting. Are you going to kneel or not? Yi Hao pressed the dagger against Zhenwei's body and continued to ask. Don't hurt the divine son. We'll kneel. Everyone had ugly looks on their faces. They didn't dare guarantee that Yi Hao would say anything else. They had originally thought that Yi Hao was just threatening them. However, they hadn't expected that Yi Hao would really dare to make a move. Zhenwei had been beaten up and a piece of his flesh had been cut off. Although this was the mystic realm, the crime of failing to protect Luo Yunyang would be enough to make them suffer. After all, the wrath of the sky-shaking divine nation wasn't something that ordinary people could bear. After all, Zhenwei was the divine son of the sky-shaking divine nation and the successor of the divine emperor. In the past, there had been many batches of guards who had made mistakes while protecting Zhenwei. The lightest punishment had been banishment to the border or imprisonment. The most severe punishment had been death. Martial gods might be valuable in other factions, but in the eyes of the sky-shaking divine nation, they were worthless like pigs and dogs compared to Zhenwei. The only thing they could do now was follow Yi Hao's temper and reduce the damage to Zhenwei as much as possible. This way, they could at least reduce the punishment that the sky-shaking divine nation would give them. Everyone exchanged glances. Their eyes were filled with displeasure as they glared at Yi Hao and knelt down. Chapter 549. No way. Everyone turned their heads away, unwilling to look at Yi Hao. They were afraid that they wouldn't be able to control themselves and would attack Yi Hao. Come on, I want to hear slapping, Yi Hao said with a smile. What does it have to do with us if you want to hear slapping? Everyone was stunned when they heard Yi Hao's special request. Some of them even felt like their heads were cramping. Everyone, 1,000 slaps. I'll cut off a piece of his flesh if I miss a single one. Yi Hao smiled as he scanned the crowd. Everyone's mood didn't improve at all when they saw Yi Hao's smile. Don't go too far. Little Xin glared at Yi Hao gloomily and nearly shouted. You can slap him 10,000 times. You can think about it yourself if you miss a single one. Yi Hao liked to stick his neck out like this. He could take revenge for Zhuge Liang's punch. Little Xin wanted to retort, but when he saw the smile on Yi Hao's face, he was worried that Yi Hao would increase the number of slaps. So, he swallowed the words that were at the tip of his tongue. It wasn't that he didn't dare to resist, but that Zhenwei's flesh would be cut off. If Zhenwei really had his flesh cut off because of him, then he would really be on the same path. He now regretted jumping out to speak. When they saw that Little Xin wanted to slap them 10,000 times, those who wanted to slap them 1,000 times actually felt relieved. Slap, slap, slap. Everyone immediately started slapping their own faces left and right. Instantly, a chaotic mess of slapping sounds rang out. They felt that this was the greatest humiliation they had ever suffered in their lives. They might as well kill them all right now. This was simply torture. However, Zhenwei was in Yi Hao's hands. Even if they wanted to cry, they had to keep it in their hearts. Wait a minute. Yi Hao suddenly spoke up to stop them as they were slapping their own faces. Everyone looked at Yi Hao bitterly. They wanted to know what other tricks Yi Hao had in mind. If looks could kill, Yi Hao would probably have died 10,000 times by now. You guys don't have any rhythm at all. Can't you guys be more orderly and have some rhythm? Yi Hao said with a smile. Damn you, you still have to listen to the rhythm of your face slapping? Can you not torture me like this? Hearing Yi Hao's words, everyone was so angry that they almost jumped up. They couldn't help but curse in their hearts. If there's no rhythm, I won't be happy listening to it. My hands might tremble. It won't be good if I accidentally hurt someone. The dagger in Yi Hao's hand kept moving around Zhenwei's body and finally stopped at Zhenwei's crotch. Sensing the position of the dagger in Yi Hao's hand, Zhenwei instantly forgot the pain in his body and straightened his body. Although this was a mystic realm, he was still afraid of leaving behind any repercussions. If he could not get it up in the future, that would be a tragedy. Can you move your dagger away a little? Zhenwei said nervously. There was a hint of flattery in his tone. Zhenwei finally knew fear now. After all, as the god's son of heaven of the myriad lands continent, he had all the beauties in the world. After all, what kind of woman wouldn't obediently throw herself into his arms after knowing his identity? At the same time, he also liked women very much. If he really couldn't get it up because of this, then what was the point of living? Why aren't you guys listening to him? Slap more rhythmically. After speaking, Zhenwei sternly ordered Little Xin and the others. Fine, they had already received Yi Hao's threat. Now that they had Zhenwei's order, how would they dare to disobey? One by one, they began to try and coordinate with the slapping sounds of the people around them. Gradually, the slapping sounds slowly overlapped. In an instant, clear and loud slapping sounds rang out. Only then did Yi Hao nod his head in satisfaction. Seeing Yi Hao's satisfied expression, everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone's faces were bitter. They probably never thought that there would be a day when they would have to slap their own mouths to see someone else's satisfaction. Come, follow my rhythm. Gang up on him, gang up on him. Wah! Seeing everyone slapping their own mouths, Yi Hao felt a rare pleasure in his heart. However, it didn't mean that he would let these people off easily. One had to know that Yi Hao had seen how arrogant these people were at the beginning. In the past, who knew how many honest and weak people had been bullied by them? Yi Hao naturally wanted to teach these people a lesson. Yi Hao couldn't help but recall a song from his previous life and gave everyone an example. Hearing Yi Hao's rhythm, everyone was extremely unwilling, but they still consciously followed him. Damn, you're even better than me. Hearing everyone's rhythmic slapping sounds, Zhen Wei couldn't help but widen his eyes. He thought that he was very good at bullying people. After all, there were many people he didn't like who would naturally be bullied to death by him. However, he didn't expect Yi Hao to be able to bully people to this extent. If it weren't for the fact that he had a grudge against Yi Hao, he almost wanted to have a discussion with Yi Hao. However, Yi Hao hit him today and even cut his flesh. He bullied him because he was his subordinate. Zhen Wei had to take revenge for this. He wanted Yi Hao to know how serious the consequences of provoking him were. He wanted Yi Hao to bear the wrath of the entire Zhentian divine nation. He wanted everyone and everything that had anything to do with Yi Hao to disappear from the face of the earth. This wasn't him boasting. It was simply too easy for the Zhentian divine nation to do. He had already taken a fancy to a woman of the Holy Dynasty's holy son because he didn't like that holy son. The entire Holy Dynasty disappeared from the Myriad Kingdom continent overnight. As for that woman, she naturally became his object. As for that holy son, he received all kinds of torture and couldn't even beg for death. In the end, he was tortured to the point of schizophrenia and became neither human nor ghost. My lord, this. Hearing everyone's rhythmic slapping sounds, Zhuge Liang didn't know how to describe it. His lord was too awesome. He only felt that it was especially satisfying to watch little Shin slap people's faces. Come on, hand over all your valuables. Yi Hao suddenly spoke up as he watched the crowd slapping their faces excitedly. You're actually a robber? Hearing Yi Hao's words, everyone nearly vomited a mouthful of blood. One must know that although everyone's soul could enter this secret realm, they could bring in things from the real world. If those things disappeared, they would also disappear in the real world. Hurry up and hand over your spatial storage equipment. Yi Hao swept his gaze over the spatial rings on everyone's hands. He believed that these people, as martial gods and people of the divine nation, must have a lot of good things in their hands. After all, he had already offended them. Yi Hao no longer hesitated and might as well offend them thoroughly. Little Shin and the others felt their hearts ache. However, they still reluctantly took off their spatial rings. Zhuge Liang, search them. Yi Hao didn't believe that these people would be so honest. Chapter 550. Sure enough, after a while, Zhuge Liang found some spatial equipment on them. Kill them. Yi Hao knew that Zhuge Liang's cultivation time was almost up, so he immediately sent a voice transmission. Zhuge Liang hardened his heart and immediately obeyed Yi Hao's order. In the blink of an eye, everyone was killed. Even when they died, they did not know what was going on. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion dragon power. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion dragon power. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 800 million dragon power. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion and 10 billion dragon power. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion and 95 billion dragon power. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion and 5 billion dragon power. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining 1 billion dragon power. The system rang more than 20 times before it finally stopped. What? Is this for real? Yi Hao was extremely excited and could not believe it. After all, the total amount of dragon power was more than 20 billion. After killing these martial gods, he had obtained more dragon power than all the dragon power he had obtained before. Now, He had more than 30 billion dragon power in total. What Yi Hao did not know was that he had once again caused a sensation in the outside world. According to the calculation, after reaching 10 billion dragon power, one could be promoted to a theocracy. However, under the control of the 4 theocracies, no country dared to break 10 billion dragon power because it was purely suicidal. Because the 4 theocracies were too powerful, even imperial dynasties had to prepare for thousands of years before they dared to do so. Moreover, they had to have a good relationship with the theocracies, just like Yun Kang and Bing Yuan. But that was because there were many theocracies and they were very competitive, so they had such an opportunity. Theocracies were different. No matter how fierce the competition between the 4 theocracies was, there was one thing that they especially agreed on. That was the level of theocracies. Now that the 4 theocracies had the momentum of dividing the world into 4, they did not want to see other forces promote to theocracies. Whoever did so would have to face the wrath of the 4 theocracies. Before that, the 4 divine nations had wiped out quite a number of top-notch sacred dynasties. That was why many of the top sacred dynasties in the 4 Fiends Alliance were stuck at 9 billion dragon power. However, he didn't dare to exceed 10 billion. That was because 10 billion was the bottom line of the 4 divine nations. It was the line of death. For Yi Hao to do such a thing, it meant that Yi Hao had declared war on the 4 god nations. Therefore, in the 10,000 land continent, even more people wanted to know what ability Yi Hao had to do this. Because Yi Hao had brought them too much shock. Everyone looked at the remaining 2 lists in the sky quietly. One was the blood-red random entry list, and the other was the Empire list. Now, only these 2 lists were left in the sky. Even the Divine Kingdom list had disappeared. Looking at the 30 billion points of dragon energy behind the name of the Fire Dragon Empire, everyone felt like they were dreaming. After all, they had all mocked the Fire Dragon Empire in the beginning because the Fire Dragon Empire only had 14 points of dragon power. How could they not mock them for daring to go against the Empire? But in less than a month's time, the Fire Dragon Empire's dragon power had increased from 14 points to 30 billion. It was as if the Fire Dragon Empire was slapping them in the face with their strength. You actually dared to kill them. You must be crazy. Seeing Zhuge Liang kill all of his subordinates, Zhen Wei roared crazily. At this moment, even Zhen Wei felt as if his heart was dripping blood. That was because he had obtained that dragon power by slaughtering a saint-level secret realm with his own hands. That was 20 billion dragon power. Even for the Zhentian divine nation, 20 billion dragon power wasn't a small amount. Since he had already destroyed the saint-level secret realm, he didn't care about the emperor-level secret realm at all. However, how could he have imagined that he would fail in this emperor stage region that he looked down upon? And it was an extremely tragic defeat. He had suffered the greatest humiliation of his life, losing 20 billion dragon power. Moreover, all of his subordinates had been killed at this moment, and he had fallen into the hands of Yi Hao. Hand over the origin fragment. Yi Hao ignored Zhen Wei's madness and said directly. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhen Wei felt guilty and couldn't help but avert his gaze. Origin fragment? What's an origin fragment? I've never heard of it. Don't pretend with me. How did you get here without the origin fragment? Yi Hao looked at Zhen Wei mockingly. Zhen Wei frowned. Although he didn't know the specific function of this origin fragment, he had a feeling that this origin fragment was definitely not an ordinary item. Originally, he was still imagining that Yi Hao didn't know about the origin fragment. Who knew that Yi Hao actually knew about it? Hurry up and hand it over. Save yourself from physical pain. Even if you kill this divine son, I won't hand it over. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhen Wei's tone was unyielding. This was because he had a feeling that this origin fragment might be able to change the situation of the Myriad Kingdom continent. It was very important to Zhentian Divine Kingdom. For this origin fragment, even if he had to sacrifice his life, he wouldn't hesitate. Sky-devouring rats, teach him a lesson. After Yi Hao finished speaking, a group of sky-devouring rats immediately surrounded him. Looking at the sky-devouring rats that were drooling over him, Zhen Wei's eyes were filled with fear. You devil, you lunatic. Zhen Wei tried to use curses to ease the fear in his heart. Noble divine son, these sky-devouring rats don't hurt when they bite people. No, just kill this divine son. Don't worry, it's not that easy to die. No matter what, you have to play for 10 days to half a month. You'll die a horrible death if you torture this divine son like this. Oh, haven't you tortured others before? Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhen Wei instantly fell silent. Because what Yi Hao said was right, he had also tortured countless people. Because as long as he didn't like someone, he would torture them to death. If Zhuge Liang hadn't appeared at the beginning, he would have also tortured Yi Hao because he didn't like Yi Hao. As long as he didn't like someone, he would kill them. But he didn't expect that things would develop to this point. But now, he could finally understand the feelings of those who were tortured by him. At this moment, Zhen Wei's heart was filled with fear. After all, a group of green-eyed rats surrounded you and wanted to bite you. Anyone would feel fear. Chapter 551. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Zhen Wei could hear the squeaks of the rats from time to time. Forget it. So what if I give it to him? Who can take away something that belongs to Zhentian Kingdom? Zhen Wei thought to himself. Squeak, ah. Suddenly, a sky-devouring rat squeaked and bit Zhen Wei's thigh. Zhen Wei couldn't take it anymore and cried out. Zhen Wei held his thigh and cried out in pain. When had he ever suffered such a serious injury? In Zhen Wei's heart, there was only hatred for Yi Hao. However, he was all alone now and there was nothing he could do. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Zhen Wei said bitterly as he broke out in cold sweat. The current Zhen Wei was no longer as arrogant and despotic as he was at the beginning. You should have given it to me earlier. Why did you have to suffer so much? Don't you think so, divine son? Yi Hao said with a smile. If he had relied on himself, he might not have dared to enter the sage secret realm, let alone the god secret realm. If he went there alone, he would be courting death. However, he didn't expect that someone would deliver it to him. Zhen Wei reluctantly took out the 2 origin fragments from the spatial pendant. When Yi Hao saw the 2 origin fragments in Zhen Wei's hands, a smile appeared on his face. This was because Zhen Wei had 2 complete origin fragments in his hands. Yi Hao immediately took the origin fragments. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an origin fragment. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 800 million experience point. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for obtaining an origin fragment. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 900 million experience point. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for leveling up. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for leveling up. Eat him, Yi Hao said to the sky-devouring rat as he pulled down Zhen Wei's space pendant. According to Zhen Wei's character, even if Yi Hao let him go, he wouldn't let Yi Hao go. Yi Hao might as well add more fear to Zhen Wei's heart. No, you don't keep your word. Zhen Wei immediately shouted when he heard Yi Hao's words. As for Zhen Wei's subsequent curses, Yi Hao did not care at all. Instead, he flew into the void with Zhuge Liang. Just as I expected, it's an origin source fragment. Yi Hao looked at the origin source fragment in front of him and felt slightly disappointed. Yi Hao put away the origin shards. Ding dong, source dregs can be fused into source fragments. Do you wish to fuse them? Fuse. Yi Hao had just put away the origin shards when the system's notification rang out. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining an origin source fragment. Currently, there are 6 origin source fragments. The host is rewarded with a chance to draw a lottery. It's time to leave this place. Yi Hao glanced at the void and was about to leave. But at this moment, the void suddenly changed, and 9 continents appeared. The 9 continents were of different shapes, and 6 of them were shining brightly. Yi Hao looked at the 6 shining continents and felt a sense of familiarity. It's an origin fragment. Yi Hao suddenly thought of it and immediately looked into the infinite space ring. Hey, where are my origin source fragments? Yi Hao was surprised to find that all the origin source fragments in the infinite space ring had disappeared. Yi Hao was very anxious. After all, it was related to him unifying the infinite lands. At the same time, it was also related to whether he could complete the task. Yi Hao immediately looked at the 6 shining continents. He found that the 6 continents had disappeared and 6 origin source fragments appeared in their place. Yi Hao immediately flew over. At this moment, the 6 origin source fragments suddenly moved and flew toward him. The origin source fragments were so fast that Yi Hao could not see them clearly. He only felt a pain in one of his fingers. Is this origin source fragment recognizing its master? Yi Hao looked at the origin source fragment and saw a trace of his blood. Suddenly, Yi Hao's vision blurred and a void appeared in front of him. There were countless balls of light in the void. Finally, his eyes fell on a tiny ball of light. Could this be the power of the origin source on the infinite lands? Yi Hao looked at the red ball of light. Because Yi Hao saw that a few areas on the ball of light were the same as his own origin source fragment. The scene changed. A barren land appeared in front of Yi Hao. There were only a few wild beasts on the land. But the actions of the wild beasts shocked Yi Hao. Every sneeze of the wild beasts would form a tornado. Every step that the wild beasts took would leave a huge footprint on the land. Are these still wild beasts? These divine-level magical beasts are nothing more than this. Yi Hao looked at this scene in shock. Slowly, the land began to change. There were more and more wild beasts. But at the same time, these wild beasts had returned to normal. And those powerful wild beasts were nowhere to be seen. At this moment, the sky suddenly changed. The entire land was shrouded in black haze. Are those people? Yi Hao looked at the people walking out from the black haze. They were all wearing different kinds of armor. There were men and women in this group. But without exception, these people were all very young. They looked a bit like young masters and young ladies who were training. A few of them whispered and were about to rush into the void and grab the power of the origin source of this world. They wanted to take it for themselves. But at this moment, the land suddenly shook and more than a dozen wild beasts appeared. Yi Hao was shocked. He recognized these wild beasts. They were the wild beasts that appeared before. Those wild beasts roared at the sky. Suddenly, all the wild beasts in the infinite lands were boiling. And when those young masters and young ladies saw this scene, their faces became serious. Those people whispered again and actually took the initiative to attack the wild beasts. What a powerful saber! What a powerful sword! Yi Hao saw 2 of them. They slashed out with their saber and stabbed with their sword. They actually destroyed tens of millions of wild beasts. And the entire land below them, the mountains and rivers instantly shattered and the seawater evaporated. Even the sky was torn open. What realm is this? Seeing the 2 people's seemingly simple but profound attacks, Yi Hao was so shocked that he couldn't speak to himself. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for comprehending the superficial knowledge of one sword martial technique. Martial technique level super heaven stage. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for comprehending the superficial knowledge of one sword martial technique. Martial technique level super heavenly tribulation. Seeing the 2 people's attack movements, Yi Hao's mind rang out. Super. Heaven stage. Yi Hao didn't expect that the 2 of them only used a simple sword and a simple saber. They actually surpassed the heaven stage martial technique. One had to know that the strongest martial technique in the infinite lands was only a heaven stage martial technique. It should be that this saber and sword have exceeded the tolerance of this world. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to be a heaven stage martial technique. Yi Hao looked at the shattered sky and analyzed. Chapter 552. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so wild beasts became tens of thousands of meters in size. One by one, they opened their bloody mouths and attacked the dozen or so young men and women. The dozen or so wild beasts were actually evenly matched with the dozen or so people. This speed is simply. Seeing the battle between the people and the beasts, Yi Hao was speechless. Because the movements of those people and beasts seemed to be very slow, but in fact, they were extremely fast. Yi Hao suddenly felt a severe headache. Watching the battle made his head feel like it was about to explode. After an unknown period of time, Yi Hao saw that the myriad kingdom continent in front of him had completely changed. After the baptism of war, the entire myriad kingdom continent was shattered and its original appearance could not be seen at all. It was hard to imagine that this myriad kingdom continent, which was countless times larger than Earth, had been shattered by a dozen or so people and a dozen or so wild beasts. Human-shaped tanks were no longer enough to describe the combat strength of these people. They were all living human-shaped atomic bombs. After an unknown period of time, the dozen or so wild beasts were completely slaughtered. And the dozen or so men and women were basically all seriously injured. The last dozen or so people walked towards the origin power, but at this moment, the scene in front of them disappeared. Why is it gone? Yi Hao's curiosity had just been piqued. After all, the shock from the previous scene reached the depths of his soul. Of course, the harvest was also huge. He had obtained 2 super heaven-ranked martial skills. But he really wanted to know what happened next. Why did magical beasts appear on the myriad kingdom continent and so many countries appear? Why did the origin fragment shatter? And most importantly, who were those dozen or so people and where did they go? But the scene was frozen just like that. Could it be that I need to find the remaining 3 fragments to unlock these secrets? Yi Hao guessed. He was now a little impatient and wanted to find the remaining 3 fragments as soon as possible. And the remaining 3 fragments, one of them might be in the Beast Roar Valley. But Yi Hao really did not know about the remaining 2 fragments. If he really wanted to fight in the Myriad Kingdom continent, looking for the 2 fragments was undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. Let's go back first. Yi Hao moved his mind and directly stored the 6 fragments into the space. Greetings, my lord. Within the palace of the Fire Dragon Empire, everyone recovered from their shock when they saw Yi Hao appear out of thin air and greeted him. You may rise. Fire Emperor, General Chen Ziqiao and General Sun, how's the progress? Yi Hao swept his gaze across everyone as he asked in a low voice. Reporting to your majesty, the 3 generals are attacking quickly. They have taken all the territories of the Hishan camp under their command. Li Hong immediately stood up and reported. The way Li Hong looked at Yi Hao now was completely different. His eyes were filled with respect and admiration for Yi Hao. Thinking back to a few years ago, Yi Hao was just a useless prince. Meanwhile, the Fire Dragon Empire was plagued by internal and external troubles. Later on, something happened to Yi Batian. He thought that the Fire Dragon Empire was finished. But who would have thought that Yi Hao would suddenly rise to power? In just a few short years, the trend and speed of development was something that he couldn't keep up with. Moreover, the Fire Dragon Empire was getting stronger and stronger. Even the imperial court could be destroyed by Yi Hao. Moreover, he destroyed more than 30 of them at once. Sigh, it seems like I'm really old and can't keep up with my lord's pace. If my lord knew all of this, he would definitely be very pleased. Li Hong sighed. After all, the Fire Dragon Empire was so big and there were countless elites in the imperial court. However, as the head of the civil officials, he felt powerless. Thinking of this, Li Hong seemed to have made up his mind. He stood up and said, Your Majesty, I'm old and would like to retire and return to my hometown. Please allow me. What, Lord Li, you can't do this. Lord Li has worked hard and the Fire Dragon Empire has just started. How can you retire and return to your hometown at this time? My lord, we can't agree to Lord Li's request. It could be seen that Li Hong still had a lot of prestige in the imperial court. As soon as Li Hong finished speaking, many officials immediately stood up and spoke up. However, there were also many people whose eyes were shining brightly. Yi Hao glanced at Li Hong and realized that Li Hong had indeed aged a lot after not seeing him for a few years. When he thought about how he had always relied on Li Hong to manage the imperial court, he felt that he had indeed mistreated Li Hong. After all, Li Hong was an old official. For him to stand up for him at such an important time showed his loyalty. Moreover, the smooth running of the Fire Dragon Empire was mostly due to Li Hong's efforts. However, if he agreed to Li Hong's request now, he wouldn't be able to find a suitable candidate. He could rely on the system to summon a few civil officials. However, if they were appointed to important positions, even if the subordinates didn't say it out loud, they would still feel estranged. Thinking of this, he couldn't agree to Li Hong's request. Let's talk about this later. Yi Hao waved his hand and said perfunctorily, "Have the 3 imperial courts of emperor when made any moves?" Li Hong still wanted to say something, but seeing Yi Hao's attitude, he could only hold his tongue for the time being. Many people smiled when they saw Yi Hao's way of doing things. However, there were still some people who, although they were smiling, had a hint of disappointment in their eyes. They looked at Li Hong's back view with jealousy. Yi Hao scanned the hall and realized that there were thousands of officials, but most of them were new faces. It was obvious that he wasn't doing a good job as the emperor. Furthermore, at this very moment, Yi Hao noticed the changes in everyone's expressions. It seems that Li Hong has suffered a lot in this position. After all, it must be very difficult for an old man who was only a marshal general to manage so many young and rebellious youths. At this thought, a person suddenly appeared in Yi Hao's mind. It was the first woman he met when he first came to this world. Thinking about it now, Yi Hao couldn't help but smile. At this moment, when the civil and military officials saw Yi Hao suddenly smile, they were all curious as to why Yi Hao was in such a good mood. "By the way, Prime Minister Li, where's your daughter? Is she married?" Yi Hao smiled and looked at Li Hong. For some reason, when Yi Hao asked this question, he felt a little nervous. The question was unintentional, but the listener was interested. All the officials in the hall were instantly excited. What's going on? Could it be that His Majesty has taken a fancy to Lord Li's daughter? I heard that Lord Li's daughter has grown up to be beautiful and elegant. She's a good match for His Majesty. His Majesty is already in his early 20s. It's time for him to marry a concubine. Chapter 553. Everyone was whispering among themselves as they looked at Li Hong enviously, waiting for Li Hong's reply. Many of them were even looking forward to Li Yura getting married. After all, Yi Hao was the emperor of the 9 and 5. Moreover, he was handsome and had yet to have a concubine. If their daughters could become Yi Hao's concubine, they would probably wake up laughing in their dreams. However, each and every one of them knew their own limits. How could their daughters be worthy of Yi Hao? But Li Hong was different. His position in the court was already stable. If his daughters were to marry Yi Hao, no one would be able to shake Li Hong's position. When Li Hong heard Yi Hao's words, he felt like he was in a dream. Because his daughter was already of marriageable age. However, in his eyes, there was no one that could compare to Yi Hao. From the beginning, he had wanted to ask Yi Hao to make Li Yura his concubine. But Yi Hao had not been in the Fire Dragon Empire all this while. Moreover, the Fire Dragon Empire was growing stronger and stronger. And all this was done by Yi Hao alone. So in his opinion, his daughter was increasingly not good enough for Yi Hao. So he suppressed this thought in his heart. But he did not expect Yi Hao to ask this question in front of all the civil and military officials in the court. No matter what Yi Hao was thinking, at the very least, if Yi Hao mentioned his daughter, it meant that he was interested in his daughter. Li Hong was so excited that he could not speak. "Old Li, why are you in a daze?" Cheng Yarojin, who was standing beside him, reminded him anxiously. Because of Li Yura, he had even cheated Li Hong of a bottle of wine. Now that Yi Hao had taken the initiative to bring it up, how could he not seize the opportunity? He knew that this could kill him. Staying up too late was Li Hong's wish all along. Ju, who was also the right prime minister, also pulled Li Hong's shoulder anxiously and kept talking to him. He winked at Li Hong. Municipal government, body, one had to know that he and Li Hong were truly a pair of fellow sufferers. No matter how much pressure there was in the imperial court, the two of them had to bear it. No matter how much hardship there was, they had to bear it. Naturally, he was willing to see Li Hong make a name for himself. "Master, my daughter." Li Hong had just calmed down and was very excited. "Mood, speak." Before he could finish his sentence, Yi Hao interrupted him. Forget it. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Li Hong's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he had answered too late and had angered Her Majesty? Li Hong was nervous and regretful. If he had known, he would have answered earlier. And Yi Hao's forget it immediately raised the tension in the hall. And some people actually began to rejoice in their hearts. This was because Li Hong had taken over the position of Prime Minister. He did not do it for fame and fortune, but for the people wholeheartedly. He had indeed done a lot of good things. So the old man's heart was also on Li Hong's side. Oh, I am Prime Minister Li's student. I specially came to the imperial capital to pay my respects to my esteemed teacher. Yi Hao lied casually. After all, if he revealed his true identity, the old man might not believe him. Then I advise you to go back. Prime Minister Li has never sought personal gain for his own people. It will be a waste of time if you go. The old man somewhat believed Yi Hao's words, but he still tried to persuade Yi Hao. This was because many of Li Hong's disciples had gone to Li Hong to ask for an official position, but they had all been coaxed away by Li Hong. In Li Hong's words, either you rely on your own ability to get an official position, or don't say that you know me. I find it embarrassing. So in the old man's opinion, Yi Hao was also the kind of person who came to take advantage of opportunities. Yi Hao did not expect the old man to be so quick-witted and considerate. He just wanted to ask for directions. Why was it so difficult? However, from the old man's attitude, he could analyze that Li Hong had a good reputation among the people. This made Yi Hao feel very gratified. Just as Yi Hao was about to ask more questions, a young man's voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Miss Li, just agree to my request. Yi Hao immediately looked over curiously and saw a white-clothed young lady and a hedonistic young man entering his sight. Meanwhile, Yi Hao's gaze was fixed on the young girl. Li Yura. That's right, the young girl was Li Yura. Li Yura had become even more slender and elegant in the past few years. She was dressed in white and looked like a floating immortal. Moreover, her beautiful face was almost flawless. However, Li Yura did not seem to be in a good mood. Her eyes were filled with disgust as she looked at the young master. Chapter 554. When everyone heard Yi Hao's voice, they all looked at Yi Hao curiously. They wanted to know who dared to go against eldest young Master Wang. This eldest young Master Wang's name was Wang Haidao. He wasn't originally from the Fire Dragon Empire. He was the young master of an imperial family. Later on, his entire family moved to the Fire Dragon Empire's imperial capital. His family developed very well in the Fire Dragon Empire. There were even many officials from the Wang family. After all, the Wang family was an imperial power. If they were willing to join the Fire Dragon Empire, how could anyone in the Fire Dragon Empire object? Moreover, the Wang family's strong economic and military strength could be of great help to the Fire Dragon Empire. Naturally, the Wang family became a tyrant in the imperial capital. Ordinary people didn't dare to provoke them. Wang Haidao relied on his family's strength to be even more unscrupulous in the Yanglong imperial capital. Many people didn't want to provoke the Wang family, so they could only turn a blind eye. When Wang Haidao first came to the Yanglong imperial capital, he wasn't so arrogant. But now, Wang Haidao had become the #1 young master in the imperial capital. Countless people wanted to curry favor with him. When Wang Haidao first came to the Fire Dragon Empire, he saw Li Yura. When he first saw Li Yura, he was already stunned. He didn't expect that there would be such a beauty in the world. Thus, from that moment on, he had made up his mind to obtain Li Yuluo. But Li Yura wasn't someone to be trifled with. Although the Wang family was powerful, they were now under the Fire Dragon Empire. They belonged to the Fire Dragon Empire. Li Hong was indeed the #1 civil official in the Fire Dragon Empire. He was the current prime minister. Even the Wang family didn't dare to provoke him. However, that didn't mean that he would give up. That was why he kept pestering her to win Li Yura's heart. However, Li Yura had been giving him the cold shoulder, which made him very unhappy. However, his father had warned him that he could not force Li Yura, so he could only obey. However, he was very confident that he would be able to catch up to Li Yura, because in the imperial city, no one would dare to fight over Li Yura. Therefore, in his opinion, catching up with Li Yura was only a matter of time. He had long regarded Li Yura as his exclusive property. But at this time, someone actually dared to interrupt him while he was flirting with a girl. He even said that Li Yura was his woman. Wasn't this a blatant provocation? Wang Haidao's expression immediately became gloomy. There was actually someone who dared to undermine him in the imperial capital. That person must be tired of living. It's over. This kid is finished. Of all the people he could have provoked, he actually dared to provoke young Master Wang. This kid is obviously an outsider. A hero saving a damsel in distress. He should also observe the situation. This time, this kid is dead for sure. No one who provokes young Master Wang will have a good ending. Moreover, Miss Li is here. Young Master Wang will definitely have to put on a good show. At this moment, the crowd gathered around and looked at Yi Hao with pity. In their opinion, Yi Hao dared to provoke Wang Haidao, which meant that he was doomed. Kid, hurry up and run. Sigh. The old man glanced at Yi Hao, then sighed and retreated. This was because the old man was also afraid of getting into trouble. Wang Haidao was too domineering. How could a commoner like him offend him? Not to mention others, even the current Prime Minister, Li Hong, had to turn a blind eye to Wang Haidao. Otherwise, why would the Li family not do anything when Wang Haidao kept harassing Li Yura? That was because although the Li family had a high status in the Fire Dragon Empire, they were far inferior to the Wang family in terms of martial strength. Men, break this reckless kid's legs. Wang Haidao smiled coldly and waved his hand. As Wang Haidao waved his hand, more than 20 hired thugs immediately rushed out from the crowd. All of them were martial venerables. They were dressed in black with the word Wang written on them. Everyone's expression changed when they saw this group of hired thugs. Because of the aura emitted by these hired thugs, no one dared to move recklessly. Because to them, martial venerables were too high to reach. Kid, kneel down. One of the hired thugs looked at Yi Hao disdainfully, then clenched his fist and rushed toward Yi Hao. He did not take Yi Hao seriously at all. After all, looking at Yi Hao's age, it was impossible for him to have a high cultivation level. Moreover, they were already used to this kind of thing. They had often helped Wang Haidao teach people a lesson. When they saw the hired thugs attack, no one could bear to watch this scene. Many people even looked away. Li Yura's attention was also attracted. She turned to look at Yi Hao to see who he was, but her line of sight was blocked by the hired thugs. However, Li Yura did not mind. After all, Yi Hao had just said that she was his woman. At first glance, she could tell that he was a frivolous person. Kid, why aren't you dodging? You're courting death. Seeing that Yi Hao did not dodge, the hired thug sneered and increased the strength of his fist. Crack. In an instant, the hired thug's fist landed on Yi Hao's body. On the other hand, Yi Hao was unharmed, but the hired thug's entire arm was crippled. Ah! The hired thug hugged his arm in pain and screamed loudly. Many of the people present did not manage to see what was going on. They originally thought that Yi Hao would be beaten up badly, but why was the hired thug the one who was injured? Wang Haidao's expression changed when he saw that his men were suddenly injured. Because Elder Li was one of the few experts in the Wang clan. Even they did not know that old Li had been secretly protecting Wang Haitao all this time. However, they knew that now that Elder Li had made a move, Yi Hao would definitely be finished. Millimeter. Elder Li nodded slightly. He did not take these people seriously. Instead, He looked at Yi Hao. Strange. Elder Li glanced at Yi Hao and muttered. Elder Li realized that he could not see through Yi Hao's cultivation. Elder Li was more knowledgeable and did not want to cause trouble for the Li clan. Young master, where are you from? What business do you have in Yanglong's royal capital? Wang Haidao's face showed a trace of displeasure at Elder Li's question. Elder Li, I asked you to take care of him, not to chat with him. This idiot. Elder Li cursed in his heart. He thought that the family head was so wise and calculating. How could he give birth to such an idiot who only knew how to eat, drink, and play? However, he was the master. Elder Li sighed and said politely to Yi Hao, then I'll have to offend you. You are no match for me, Yi Hao said softly. He found Elder Li pleasing to the eye, so he kindly reminded him. Arrogant. More than arrogant. This was what everyone was thinking at this moment. Many people did not know Elder Li's cultivation. However, if he was the trump card of the Wang clan to protect Wang Haidao, his cultivation could not be too weak. However, Yi Hao actually ignored such a person. Good boy, let me test your skills. Elder Li did not take Yi Hao seriously at first. Although he could not see through Yi Hao's cultivation, he only thought that Yi Hao used a technique to hide his cultivation. After all, Yi Hao was still young. He never thought that Yi Hao's cultivation would surpass his. As the saying goes, even a clay bodhisattva has some anger. With his cultivation, he could do whatever he wanted in the Yanglong imperial city. Now, a young boy said that he was no match for Yi Hao. He decided to teach Yi Hao a lesson and not be too arrogant. Wang Haidao laughed secretly. At first, he was worried that Elder Li would be merciful. However, Yi Hao was courting death by saying such words. He even dared to say that a first-order martial emperor was no match for him. He believed that with Elder Li's temper, he would definitely teach Yi Hao a lesson. Don't. Li Yura screamed when she saw that Elder Li was about to attack Yi Hao. Bitch, you only know how to protect the gigolo after a while. Wang Haidao glanced at Li Yura unhappily. He had already thought of countless ways to deal with this adulterous couple. Don't you care about him? When the time comes, I will personally beat him into a dog in front of you. Wang Haidao thought with a cold smile. Wang Haidao's heart was completely twisted at this moment. After all, as the young master of the Wang family, he was the treasure of the Wang family. He was an existence that would melt in the mouth. Chapter 556. At this moment, everyone was looking at Yi Hao in shock. Although they didn't know Elder Li's cultivation level, as Wang Haidao's protector, he couldn't be too weak. An expert from an imperial force would at least be stronger than Emperor Wu. Although they didn't see the two's movements clearly, it was obvious that Elder Li was at a disadvantage. Otherwise, Elder Li wouldn't have been so calm and collected at the beginning to use his weapon in exasperation. The most shocked person was Wang Haidao, because he knew Elder Li's strength very well. In Huangju, there were only a handful of people who could force Elder Li to use his sword. Is this kid really that strong? Wang Haidao looked at the young man who was about the same age as him suspiciously. You guys go and help Elder Li. Wang Haidao kicked the thugs' butts. He knew that he had kicked an iron plate today. However, this imperial city was his, Wang Haidao's, world. He absolutely could not tolerate others acting arrogantly in his territory. Even if it was the current emperor, he could not tolerate it. When the thugs heard Wang Haidao's command, they all drew their weapons and attacked Yi Hao. Stop! Wang Haidao, you can't afford to offend him, Li Yura shouted anxiously when she saw so many people attacking Yi Hao. Wang Haidao said disdainfully, ha ha ha, there's no one in Huangju that I, Wang Haidao, can't afford to offend. Wang Haidao looked at Li Yura mockingly and said with a smile, why do you like this kid? If you want to protect him, you don't have to use such a clumsy excuse. You. Li Yura wanted to immediately tell him Yi Hao's identity. However, Yi Hao came here alone. She was afraid that Yi Hao was deliberately hiding his identity, so she didn't dare to say it directly. Li Yura clutched the corner of his shirt nervously as he looked at Yi Hao. Yi Hao looked at Old Man Li. Old Man Li had suddenly used a weapon, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Yi Hao's gaze turned cold. Those who dared to kill him must not be allowed to live. Thinking of this, Yi Hao slapped Elder Li's wrist that was holding the dagger. Elder Li was also shocked. He didn't expect Yi Hao to be so desperate. Instead of retreating, he approached Yi Hao. If this hand of his was grabbed by Yi Hao again, then he would really be at the mercy of Yi Hao. Fight. Elder Li knew that now was not the time to retreat. Thinking of this, Elder Li reacted quickly. He suddenly changed the direction of his dagger and lifted it upwards, trying to force Yi Hao's hand back. So what if I let you attack me? Yi Hao was not afraid of Elder Li's dagger. Unless it was a sacred artifact, it would be very difficult to injure him. Yi Hao could not help but grab Elder Li's dagger with his bare hands. Is this kid crazy? Elder Li saw Yi Hao's actions. One had to know that his dagger was an emperor artifact. With his cultivation, he could definitely cripple Yi Hao's arm. Since you are courting death, don't blame me. Elder Li's gaze turned cold as he attacked Yi Hao's palm fiercely. Yi Hao channeled his martial arts power and grabbed the dagger. Let go. Yi Hao roared and snatched the dagger from Elder Li's hand. Ah! Where is my dagger? Elder Li expected that Yi Hao's palm would be bleeding, but it didn't happen. He only felt his palm lighten and the dagger in his hand disappeared. Elder Li panicked and wanted to retreat. However, a strong pulling force came from his left hand and he felt his body being lifted into the air. Yi Hao looked at the thugs who were charging at him. He treated Elder Li as a human punching bag and threw him around. At this moment, the thugs had no chance to react at all. The sabers in their hands landed on Elder Li's body. Elder Li was lifted up by Yi Hao in an instant. He was clearly in a daze and could not even defend himself. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Ah! Who dares to attack me? I will kill him. Elder Li cried out in pain. However, the thugs did not hear him at all. They were all trying their best to block Yi Hao's human weapons. They could only block with the sabers in their hands. Stop it! Stop it! Wang Hai shouted in panic when he saw Elder Li being chopped up. Although Elder Li was his subordinate, he was also one of the few elites in the Wang family. If he was really chopped to death, it would be too much. But when he looked over, he saw that all the thugs had been sent flying. The surrounding crowd all hid far away, afraid that they would be accidentally injured. Yi Hao glanced at Elder Li, who was covered in blood, and threw him aside like trash. Elder Li panted heavily and stared at Yi Hao weakly. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Die. Sensing the murderous intent in Elder Li's eyes, Yi Hao stepped on Elder Li's head. Crack. With a shattering sound, Old Man Li died immediately. Strong. He was too strong. Everyone looked at Yi Hao in shock. One person had defeated more than 20 martial venerables. Even Old Li, a first-order martial emperor expert, had been completely oppressed. It's over, it's over. Wang Hai's face turned pale when he saw Elder Li being killed. His body trembled violently as if it had been sucked out of him. Brat, you are finished. My Wang family will not let you off. Wang Hai pointed at Yi Hao and said angrily, Is that so? Yi Hao smiled and looked at Wang Hai. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a series of orderly footsteps were heard. Hundreds of well-equipped black-armored soldiers charged into the middle of the crowd. Looking at the hundreds of black-armored soldiers, the crowd immediately retreated to the side in fear. Wang Hai saw the black-armored soldiers and revealed an excited expression. It's the Wang family's black-armored soldiers, someone in the crowd suddenly said. Greetings, eldest young master. Wang Taijun looked at the crowd and finally fixed his gaze on Wang Hai. He walked to Wang Hai's side and bowed respectfully. Uncle Wang, please rise. Wang Hai was very satisfied with Wang Tijuan's timely appearance and quickly said with a humble attitude. Eldest young master, what is going on here? Wang Taijun frowned and looked at the thugs lying on the ground and wailing. It's him. It's that brat. He wants to kill me. Wang Hai pointed at Yi Hao in exasperation. Obviously, Wang Tijuan's appearance gave him confidence. Wang Taijun was instantly enraged. How dare you? This is the imperial capital. There is actually someone who dares to look down on the Wang family. Where is the law? Hearing Wang Tijuan's words, Yi Hao was enraged. His eyebrows were knitted together and his face turned ashen. He did not expect that there would be such a domineering family in the imperial capital. A small guard commander was already so arrogant. What kind of family was the Wang family? This Wang family is getting more and more overboard. It is obvious that they do not care about the emperor. You don't want to live anymore. Be careful not to let the black-armored soldiers hear you. Sai, who asked our emperor not to be in the imperial capital. Otherwise, how could the Wang family be so arrogant and despotic? Chapter 557. When everyone heard Wang Tijuan's words, they started discussing uncomfortably. According to Wang Tijuan's words, the Wang family was the law in the imperial capital. What was the current emperor worth? Your Wang family is so powerful. Don't tell me you don't put the current emperor in your eyes. Yi Hao looked at Wang Taijun and asked coldly. He wanted to see if Wang Taijun dared to admit it. Ha ha ha. Wang Taijun laughed coldly. His meaning was obvious, that since, Wang Taijun, shut up. Before Wang Taijun could finish, Wang Haidao anxiously interrupted him. Although the Wang family was considered a tyrant in the Yanglong imperial capital, they had long planned to replace Yi Hao. But before they knew the Fire Dragon Empire's background, there were some things that couldn't be said. Wang Taijun instantly realized that he had said something wrong after being yelled at. If he hadn't been stopped by Wang Haidao just now, he would have really said something wrong and been used by someone with ulterior motives. Then, the Wang family would have endless trouble. Thinking of this and listening to the discussions around him, Wang Taijun couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. You have some brains. Seeing that it was Wang Haidao who stood out to stop him, Yi Hao also felt a little surprised. In order to alleviate his mistake, Wang Taijun couldn't help but look around. Suddenly, Wang Taijun was puzzled. One had to know that Elder Li had protected Wang Haidao. But why hadn't Elder Li appeared when Wang Haidao's life was in danger? Eldest young master, where is Elder Li? Wang Tijuan's question immediately ignited Wang Haidao. Originally, he was already feeling restless because of Elder Li's death and didn't know how to explain it to his family. But this Wang Taijun, he really touched the pot that didn't boil. Dead. Wang Haidao's tone was unhappy, but he still spoke the truth. What? Dead? Who did it? Where's Elder Li's corpse? Wang Tijuan's face was full of shock as he asked several questions. The Black Armored Army all pricked up their ears. This was because old Li was very prestigious in the Wang clan. He was even the idol of many of the Black Armored Army present. But now, they were told that Elder Li was dead. How could they believe it? Over there. Wang Haidao pointed at Old Man Li's body, which was too horrible to look at, and said angrily. This. Wang Taijun saw Elder Li's miserable appearance and could not help sucking in a breath of cold air. Then, he looked at Yi Hao. Through Wang Hai and Dao's gaze, he knew that Yi Hao was the culprit. I can't be careless now. Wang Taijun resisted the urge to make a move. This was because even Elder Li wasn't a match for Yi Hao. Relying on a few hundred black-armored soldiers to deal with some weaklings was obviously a pipe dream to deal with an expert like Yi Hao. At this time, he definitely couldn't let the Wang family fight, because it would be a great loss if they died. Go and find the officials guarding the city. Tell them that there are people causing trouble in the imperial city. Ask them to bring people to arrest them. Wang Taijun rolled his eyes and ordered the Black Armored Army beside him. Hearing Wang Tijuan's words, Wang Haidao secretly praised him and secretly gave him a thumbs up. This move of diverting the calamity to someone else was simply too ingenious. If Yi Hao and the Fire Dragon Empire were to fight, it would be best if both sides suffered great losses. Yi Hao heard Wang Tijuan's words and stood quietly at the side. He wanted to see if the Wang family could really cover up the sky with one hand. Beside Li Yura, there were hidden guards. Seeing the Wang family make a move, they thought for a moment and immediately went into the crowd. Great Commander Zhongyong, there are people causing trouble in the city. My eldest young master is present, please provide assistance. A black armored army immediately found Zhongyong and said. Zhongyong was originally just a small commander, but because he followed Yi Hao from the beginning, he had been doing well. After climbing to his current position, he controlled nearly 10,000 elite soldiers. Zhongyong narrowed his eyes and glanced at the black armored army. He softly said "Oh" and ignored him. Seeing Zhongyong's expression, the black armored army immediately said, "My eldest young master said that as long as the great commander provides assistance, there will be great reward." Hearing the black armored army's words, Zhongyong immediately beamed with joy. What great rewards! Someone is causing trouble in the imperial city. It's my duty to deal with it. The black armored army cursed in his heart, but he forced a flattering smile on his face. Men, gather 3,000 soldiers and follow me. Zhongyong raised his arm and ordered his subordinates. Ta. 3,000 elites of the imperial city immediately rushed in the direction of Yi Hao. Seeing the 3,000 elites, the onlookers discussed animatedly. This Wang family is too powerful. They can even mobilize the imperial city's elites. Sigh, it seems that the situation in the imperial city has been fixed. This kid is finished. Going against the imperial city's elites is equivalent to going against the entire Fire Dragon Empire. Greetings, eldest young Master Wang. Seeing Wang Haidao, Zhongyong immediately showed a flattering smile. Thank you for your help, great Commander Zhongyong. I will definitely inform my father. Then, eldest young master, please put in a few good words. Because Yi Hao's back was facing Zhongyong, when he heard Zhongyong's voice, he immediately felt that it was familiar. Yi Hao just remembered that Zhongyong was his first follower. Check Zhongyong's personal information, Yi Hao immediately said to the system. Zhongyong's loyalty, 39 strength, level 3 martial spirit. Just looking at the loyalty, Yi Hao's face immediately turned pale. This 39 loyalty was like having no loyalty at all. It meant that Zhongyong could betray him at any time. That kid, when you see me, why don't you quickly surrender? In order to perform well, Zhongyong hugged Wang Haidao's thigh. He directly pointed at Yi Hao's back and shouted. Zhongyong, you're not bad. Yi Hao said angrily with a smile. The dignified great commander of the Fire Dragon Empire's imperial capital turned out to be this kind of trash. How could he not be angry? Hearing Yi Hao's familiar yet strange voice, Zhongyong could not help but frown. He looked at Yi Hao's back and asked, "Who are you?" "Take a good look at who I am," Yi Hao shouted and turned around directly. Seeing Yi Hao's face, Zhongyong carefully looked and instantly his eyes widened. His heart was directly filled with fear. Zhongyong instantly recalled the scene a few years ago when Yi Hao was still a prince. He was in a restaurant, kneeling in front of Yi Hao. And now, he actually colluded with the Wang family and was caught red-handed by Yi Hao. Thinking of this, Zhongyong's legs began to tremble uncontrollably. "Why, Zhongyong, do you know this little bastard?" Wang Taijun saw Zhongyong's unnatural expression and asked. Zhongyong was shocked and wanted to immediately shut Wang Tijuan's mouth. Daring to call the emperor a little bastard, he really did not want to live anymore. He is the current emperor. Zhongyong had almost used up all his strength to say those words. Chapter 558. Zhongyong's voice was not loud, but most people heard it. Then they looked at Yi Hao in shock. Although they had heard that the emperor of the Fire Dragon Empire was young, they did not expect him to be so young. Everyone looked at Wang Haidao. Unsurprisingly, Wang Haidao had kicked an iron plate this time. He dared to attack the emperor in the imperial capital and even mobilized the emperor's elites. These crimes were not small. But there were also some people who thought more comprehensively and could not determine who would win or lose. After all, the Wang family was an emperor-level force. They might do something desperate. Zhongyong, are you kidding? Wang Haidao and Wang Taijun asked at the same time. This guilty general greets the emperor. Long live the emperor. Zhongyong was too lazy to care about the two. The fear in his heart made him kneel on the ground. The elites of the imperial capital were stunned. Didn't they say they were here to catch the troublemaker? Why did an emperor appear and kneel? Without thinking, all the elites of the imperial capital knelt in front of Yi Hao. It's His Majesty. It's His Majesty. This commoner greets the emperor. Long live the emperor. Everyone did not expect Yi Hao to be the emperor. They were nervous and excited as they knelt on the ground and shouted. Zhongyong, you did well. Yi Hao strode towards Zhongyong. Zhongyong lowered his head and looked at Yi Hao, who was walking towards him. He could not control the sweat on his head. Your Majesty. Zhongyong was so nervous that he could not speak. You deserve to die. Yi Hao kicked Zhongyong's face and Zhongyong was instantly sent flying. Everyone saw this scene and did not dare to breathe. He's dead. Everyone looked at the lifeless Zhongyong. They did not expect Yi Hao to be so decisive. As for the 3,000 elites, their bodies began to tremble. Yi Hao glanced at the 3,000 elites and walked towards Wang Haidao and Wang Taijun. What do you want to do? Wang Haidao and Wang Taijun took a step back in fear. Tell me, who is the law in this imperial city? Yi Hao grabbed Wang Haidao by the collar and asked loudly. Wang Haidao was completely stunned by Yi Hao's imposing manner. Although he was unwilling to say it, for the sake of his life, he said, "Of course it's you, Your Majesty. Since we are the law, do my words hold any weight?" Yi Hao continued to ask sternly. It works. Wang Haidao nodded fearfully. All right then, I bestow death upon you. If you don't die, you will be charged with the crime of disobeying an imperial decree, Yi Hao said in a dignified tone. What? Hearing Yi Hao's words, Wang Haidao almost peed his pants. Because the crime of disobeying a decree was a crime that could lead to the extermination of an entire clan. But how could he possibly commit suicide? He might as well just kill him. Which bastard dares to bully my son? Chapter 559. Do it. The commander of the golden armored warriors fell for the trap. He thought that the envoy of the death god was Yi Hao's man and immediately attacked the envoy of the death god. Seeing the golden armored warriors attacking, the envoy of the death god was not to be trifled with. He did not care about anything else and attacked one after another. In the blink of an eye, the golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god were already fighting. Fight, fight, it's best if you kill him. Yi Hao was happy to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. As for the onlookers below, they all hid in a panic. They didn't even have the qualifications to watch a battle between high-level martial god realm cultivators. Just the aftershock of the battle was enough to crush them. Li Hong, why are you still in a daze? Evacuate all the citizens from the city. Yi Hao immediately shouted when he saw that Li Hong was still in a daze. Yes, yes, as you command. Li Hong also reacted quickly and ordered the citizens to evacuate the city quickly. Kill this group of idiots for me. How dare they behave so atrociously in my territory? Take a piss and look at their own morality. Watching the battle between the golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god, Yi Hao ignited the atmosphere. The golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god did not speak and focused on the battle. They both thought that the other party was Yi Hao's subordinate. Don't let them go. Reinforcements will be here soon. Yi Hao saw that the atmosphere was not tense enough and continued to shout. Sure enough, Yi Hao's shout immediately had an effect. The golden armored warriors and the envoy of the death god used all their strength at this time, wanting to defeat the other party. In the void, dozens of figures were constantly intertwining. It was like black and golden lines were intertwined. The roar of martial arts colliding rang out continuously. Houses in the imperial city collapsed one after another. They were all destroyed by the remaining power of the martial gods. Fortunately, Yi Hao had evacuated the citizens in time. Otherwise, there would have been heavy casualties. Yi Hao narrowed his eyes and looked at the void. Blood was spilling everywhere. Who are they? Yi Hao was still guessing which force the envoy of the death god and the golden armored warriors belonged to. Fortunately, it was a coincidence this time. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. In order to prevent these people from reacting, Yi Hao secretly released all the heaven-devouring rats and ancient mutated beasts and hid them in the surroundings. Yi Hao did not think it was enough, thus he summoned 6,000 ancient beasts and fed them all the peak martial sacred realm pills. Yi Hao only felt that his safety was guaranteed with the help of nearly 20,000 demonic beasts at the peak of the martial sage realm. Only then did he relax a little. Yifan, take this peak martial god elixir. Yi Hao handed the peak martial god elixir to Guo Yifan. Guo Yifan excitedly received the peak martial god realm elixir. She glanced at the void and immediately swallowed it. Boom! Suddenly, a figure fell from the sky and crashed into the ground. Yifan. Yi Hao immediately took out a mind control pill and threw it to Guo Yifan. Guo Yifan immediately understood. She flew to the unconscious golden armored warrior and stuffed the mind control pill into his mouth. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining a 7th order martial god. Hearing the system's notification, Yi Hao immediately sent the golden armored warrior into the cage lake. This 7th order martial god realm master was a great help to him. Bang! Following the golden armored warrior's fall, another golden armored warrior crashed to the ground. This time, without Yi Hao's instructions, Guo Yifan immediately flew to the golden armored warrior and stuffed the mind control pill into his mouth. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining a 7th order martial god. It seems that this group of black armored warriors is much more powerful than the golden armored warriors. Yi Hao saw that the number of golden armored warriors outnumbered the envoys of the death god. But so far, not a single envoy of the death god had fallen. On the contrary, 2 golden armored warriors had been seriously injured. Kill them for me, the reinforcements will be here soon. Yi Hao's heart was blooming with joy after obtaining 2 high-level martial gods. He did not forget to continue teasing the envoys of the death god and the golden armored warriors. In the void, 1 black and 1 golden armored warrior exchanged blows back and forth, fighting fiercely. The power of the martial path exploded in the void, turning into streaks of brilliant colors. Bang! Suddenly, one of the envoys of the death god fell to the ground. Finally, a black guy came. Seeing the envoy of the death god fall to the ground, Yi Hao was delighted. Guo Yifan had already flown over and fed the mind control pill to the envoy of the death god. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining an 8th order martial god. No wonder. Hearing the system's notification, Yi Hao immediately understood why the envoys of the death god were so persistent. It turned out that their cultivation was 1 level higher than the golden armored warriors. Looks like my decision was right. Yi Hao rejoiced inwardly. Because these subordinates were so powerful, after all, those 2 sides had commanders who were at least 9th order martial gods. Fight, fight, give me a few more subordinates. Yi Hao looked at the void, the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. The bigger the battle, the longer it lasted. But there were also golden armored warriors and envoys of the death god falling to the ground from time to time. Basically, those who fell to the ground were unconscious. Yi Hao did not refuse any of them, accepting them all as his subordinates. There are already 7 golden armored warriors and 4 black guys. Yi Hao counted the number of people in the cage lake. At this moment, the battle in the void was not as intense as it had been at the beginning. But there were still 9 golden armored warriors and 6 envoys of the death god. Adding the two sides together, there were still 15 people left. 15 high-level martial gods. Yi Hao was also feeling a lot of pressure. And now was the time when Yi Hao was nervous. Because the number of people on both sides was decreasing, the chances of being discovered were also increasing. And the 20,000 mutated beasts and heaven-devouring rats seemed to be able to sense the change in Yi Hao's mood. All of them were focused on the void. "We can't fight anymore, kill that kid first." The golden armored warrior commander was getting more and more nervous as the battle went on. He did not expect the Fire Dragon Empire to have such a strong expert. Like mother, like son. Not only was Imperial Aunt so powerful, even her son was so monstrous. In a country that was just a duchy, the dragon force had already surpassed all the holy dynasties. Of course, they knew about the empire ranking list. Right now, he was starting to suspect that Yi Hao might have the help of the Imperial Aunt. If that was the case, then it was simply too terrifying. If that was the case, wouldn't it mean that the purple heaven divine emperor had been toyed with by the Imperial Aunt without realizing it? But in any case, looking at the less than 10 people around, he knew that he could not continue fighting like this. If they continued fighting, they would not be able to complete their mission even if all of them died here. As for the devourer beast, it was capable of devouring all living things with strength. It was not strange for it to devour the corpses of ancient beasts. The golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god kept killing the ancient mutated beasts, but every time they killed one, it would be swallowed by Guo Yifan and turned into Guo Yifan's strength. Gradually, the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god no longer dared to kill the ancient mutated beasts. After all, who knew how much Guo Yifan's strength would increase? Kill him first. The golden armored warrior suddenly looked at the commander of the envoy of the death god. Kill. The envoy of the death god agreed with the golden armored warrior commander and said in a hoarse and terrifying voice. The two of them no longer paid attention to the ancient mutated beasts at the peak of the martial saint level. They turned and charged towards Guo Yifan. Roar. Seeing the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god charging towards him, Guo Yifan was not afraid at all. He directly crashed into them like a human bomb. Guo Yifan punched the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god respectively. The powerful strength caused the two of them to change their expressions. This was because Guo Yifan's strength had already completely surpassed theirs. The golden armored warrior commander and the envoy of the death god commander met Guo Yifan's fists with great difficulty. The veins on the golden armored warrior's face were bulging and his face was distorted. It was obvious how terrifying the strength he was enduring was. Bang! The envoy of the death god commander was not in a good state either. Not only did he retreat, but the metal mask on his face also shattered into pieces. It's actually a woman. Seeing the face behind the metal mask, Yi Hao was also greatly surprised. The first impression that the envoy of the death god gave Yi Hao was that he was a killing machine cultivated by some organization. But Yi Hao had never thought that this killing machine would actually be a woman. Yi Hao could clearly feel that when the envoy of the death god saw his mask shattered, a trace of panic appeared on his cold and expressionless face. And because of this panic, Guo Yifan had a chance. At this moment, Guo Yifan would not show any mercy to the envoy of the death god's chest. His other fist was not idle either. He blasted it towards the golden armored warrior commander. Both of them spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time and were sent flying backwards. Guo Yifan did not give the two of them any chance at all. He followed up with another attack. His fists were like raindrops, falling on the two of them. The two of them, who had been majestic at the beginning, were now beaten like stray dogs, unable to fight back. Die! Guo Yifan beat the two of them until they could not get up. He roared and smashed his fists towards their heads. The two of them immediately closed their eyes, waiting for death. Yifan, Stop. Yi Hao immediately stopped him. The best way to deal with an enemy was to kill the enemy's subordinates. And an even better way than killing the enemy's subordinates was to subdue the enemy's subordinates and use them to deal with the enemy. Now, the commander of the golden armored warriors and the commander of the death god's emissaries had become his prey. If he killed them directly, it would be too much of a pity. After all, they were high-level martial god experts. If he spent soul points and resurrection points, it would be a huge expense. After being yelled at by Yi Hao, the blood-red color in Guo Yifan's eyes immediately began to dissipate. He slowly recovered from his berserk state. This subordinate has disturbed the Lord. This subordinate deserves 10,000 death. Guo Yifan recalled everything that had happened just now and immediately apologized to Yi Hao. You did well. Yi Hao smiled with satisfaction. If Guo Yifan hadn't suddenly gone berserk, he wouldn't have been able to subdue the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god so easily. Guo Yifan looked at the golden armored warrior commander and the envoy of the death god commander at his feet and immediately took out 2 mind control pills. The golden armored warrior commander and the envoy of the death god commander looked at the pills in Guo Yifan's hand with fear and confusion. Although they wanted to struggle, they were powerless. They could only watch as Guo Yifan stuffed the mind control pills into their mouths. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining a 9th order martial god expert. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for obtaining a 9th order martial god expert. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of battle still came from the void. It turned out that the golden armored warrior and the envoy of the death god were too engrossed in their battle and did not notice the abnormality on the ground. Chapter 561. Guo Yifan nodded and leaped into the air, charging towards the golden armored warriors and envoys. Bang! 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 With a series of bangs, the remaining 8 golden armored warriors and 5 envoys were smashed to the ground. All of them looked towards the sky in panic. They couldn't believe that there was someone who could defeat them so easily in this place. They didn't even have time to react to what was going on. They felt as if a heavy blow had landed on their bodies, causing them to be seriously injured and unable to move. To be able to do this, one's strength was definitely comparable to a peak martial god, or even stronger. Where's the commander? The golden armored warriors and envoys could only place their hopes on the commander. They looked around anxiously. How could they have known that their commander had already been defeated before they even arrived? But before they could search for the commander, Guo Yifan had already fed them mind control pills. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining a 7th order martial god. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining a 7th order martial god. Ding dong, congratulations to host for obtaining an 8th order martial god. After listening to the system's notification, Yi Hao calculated that he had obtained 16 golden armored warriors and 10 envoys. As for the ancient mutated beasts and heaven-devouring rats, he had also lost more than 40 of them. But overall, he had profited greatly this time. Who are you people, and what are your names? Yi Hao released the golden armored warrior commander and the death god emissary commander and inquired. The golden armored warriors and envoys were shocked. They didn't expect that their commander had already been subdued. I am the 4 Fiend Alliance's envoy of the death god. I don't have a name. Although the envoy of the death god had already submitted to Yi Hao, his voice was still hoarse. Yi Hao found it hard to believe that such a voice came from the mouth of a young girl. Then I will confer you the title of Queen of the Death God. From now on, your duty is to complete the missions I issue. Yi Hao had already gained some understanding of the 4 Fiends' divine union during Xiao Yi's tribulation. However, Yi Hao never expected that he would clash with the 4 Fiends' alliance so soon. But trouble was often like this. If you didn't go to him, he would come to you. Since the 4 Fiends' alliance wanted to deal with him, Lin Fan was not someone to be trifled with. He would definitely get his revenge. Thank you, my lord. Hearing Yi Hao's words, the Grim Reaper Queen agreed expressionlessly. Because her mind had always been instilled with the belief to complete the mission and kill. As for the name, it was dispensable to her. It was all the same to her. Hearing the Queen of Death's voice, Yi Hao still felt uncomfortable. Your voice. Hearing Yi Hao call her voice, the Grim Reaper Queen immediately revealed a troubled expression. Because she was already used to this kind of sound. In the future, you can maintain your original voice in front of me. In front of outsiders, you can maintain your current voice. Yes. Yes, my lord. The Queen of Death tried to use her original voice, but when she spoke, she was still not used to it and stuttered a little. Nice. Although the Queen of Death spoke shyly, her bell-like voice made Yi Hao's eyes light up. Thank you, my lord. Hearing Yi Hao's praise, the Grim Reaper Queen blushed and resumed her hoarse voice. Seeing the Queen of Death's shy side, the rest of the emissaries of the Death God were all in disbelief. They were even more surprised that the Queen of Death was a woman. They would never have imagined that the commander, who was even more powerful than them and was more like a machine, would actually be a woman. And the most important thing was that she actually had a shy expression on her face. Just get used to it. Seeing the Queen of Death's expression, Yi Hao didn't make things difficult for her anymore. Instead, he asked, how many more people like you are there in the Four Fiends Alliance? This was what Yi Hao was concerned about. The Four Fiends Alliance had sent out their subordinates this time. News of the failed assassination would spread sooner or later. At that time, the Four Fiends Alliance wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. They would definitely send out more experts. Yi Hao had to be mentally prepared. The Four Fiends Alliance has 72 Death Guards. Each Death Guard has 10 people. I am the 36th commander of the Death Guards. The Queen of Death slowly said in her original voice. What? 72 guards? Hearing the Queen of Death's words, Yi Hao couldn't remain calm. There were only 10 emissaries of the Death God. He had spent so much effort to subdue them. The remaining 71 Death Guards numbered at least 710 people. 710 high-level martial god realm experts. Just thinking about it made Yi Hao feel pressured. However, this was far from the end. The Queen of Death continued, this is only the Four Fiends Alliance's special forces. There are also some ordinary troops. The number of martial god realm experts isn't small either. Yi Hao's brows were tightly knitted together. Compared to the Four Fiends Alliance, he was pitifully weak. Moreover, his dragon force had surpassed the Four Fiends Alliance. The Four Fiends Alliance definitely wouldn't let him off easily. Other than the Four Fiends Alliance, there was also the Four Divine Nations. He had broken their rules and crossed their bottom line. They definitely wouldn't let him off. Even so, Yi Hao didn't regret it. Dragon force was something that could only be encountered and not sought. If it was real, it could only be developed step by step. If he wanted to accumulate 30 billion Dragon Force points, he would need at least several tens of thousands of years to do so. Moreover, Dragon Force was very important to a country's development. Not to mention other things, just the strength of the martial path in the Fire Dragon Empire's region was comparable to any Holy Dynasty's martial path. It was only a matter of time before more and more people would be attracted to the Fire Dragon Empire's region to cultivate. Similarly, if the people of the Fire Dragon Empire cultivated in such a dense martial path, there would be more and more experts. However, it was clear that some forces wouldn't give the Fire Dragon Empire this opportunity. The Four Fiends Alliance was the best example. No matter what, Dragon Force was very important. Even if it meant risking danger, Yi Hao wouldn't hesitate. Then who are you? Yi Hao asked the golden-armored warriors after learning about the Four Fiends Alliance's emissaries of the Death God. The golden-armored warriors looked at each other. The commander stood out and said, "We are from the Purple Divine Nation." What? Purple Divine Nation? Yi Hao exclaimed when he heard the golden-armored commander's words. Even the emissaries of the Death God looked at the golden-armored warriors in shock. At their level, they had naturally heard of the Purple Divine Nation's name. It was one of the 4 divine nations in the Myriad Kingdom continent. It was a top-notch existence. Even the Four Fiends Alliance didn't dare to provoke it. After hearing the golden-armored warrior commander's explanation, Yi Hao didn't understand. He finally knew why his father was captured and why he was killed. It turned out that his mother and father had eloped and given birth to him. If this was an ordinary family, it would be fine. However, his mother was actually the imperial aunt of the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom. That was something that concerned the face of the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom. Furthermore, the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom had decreed that the God Emperor and the imperial aunt were not allowed to marry. Even if they were to marry, they had to marry someone of equal status. At the very least, it had to be the crown prince of one of the other 3 divine kingdoms. However, his mother just so happened to fall in love with the emperor of a duchy. The disparity between their statuses was instantly magnified. The imperial aunt of the 4 divine kingdoms and the emperor of a duchy. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for the 2 of them to be together. However, the 2 of them secretly got together and even had a child together. That child was naturally Yi Hao. The moment Yi Hao was born, the matter was completely exposed. Naturally, the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom strongly opposed it. As for Yi Hao's mother, she was eventually captured and brought back to the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom despite all the pressure. However, the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom still wouldn't let the matter rest. After all, they already viewed Yi Hao as a disgrace. And the best way to wash away this disgrace was to kill Yi Hao and Yi Batian. However, coincidentally, Yi Hao wasn't in Yi when the country of Yi was in chaos. If Yi Hao was still in Yi, Yi Hao might have been killed long ago. Then, there wouldn't be the current Yi Hao. However, it was precisely because Yi Hao wasn't in Yi that he saved Yi Batian's life and his own. When the imperial aunt saw her husband being captured and her son suffering, she, who was a genius, naturally wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. Soon, the imperial aunt managed to win over a group of people to support her. Gradually, the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom seemed to be united. However, they were already divided into 2 factions. One faction supported the imperial aunt, while the other supported the Violet Sky Divine Emperor. Looks like this Violet Sky Divine Emperor was forced by mother into a corner. Yi Hao sighed. If his mother was in his previous life, she would definitely be on the same level as Wu Zetian. However, he could also see how sinister the Violet Sky Divine Emperor was. He actually sent someone to assassinate him when his mother wasn't paying attention. Fortunately, Guo Yifan was around this time. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. The Violet Sky Divine Kingdom is waiting for me. Father and mother are waiting for me. Mo is waiting for me. Yi Hao clenched his fists and swore. He didn't want his mother to bear so much pressure alone. He also wanted to help her. However, if he wanted to help his mother, he needed to have power and influence. However, based on his current power and influence, it was clearly not enough. If he wanted to reunite with his parents and Zimo, he needed to grow quickly. Origin Source Fragment. Yi Hao thought of the Origin Source Fragment first. The difference between his power and the Violet Sky Divine Kingdoms was simply too big. He could barely deal with the 4 Fiends Alliance, let alone the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom, one of the 4 god nations. If the Violet Sky Divine Emperor sent more people, he would be finished. In the end, not only would he not be able to help his mother, but he would also drag her down and lose his life. However, if he could find the Origin Source Fragment, it would be different. As long as he could find all the Origin Source Fragments, he would be able to unlock all the generals and control all the demonic beasts in the entire continent. By then, he would truly be invincible in the entire Myriad Kingdoms continent. However, Yi Hao only had 6 Origin Source Fragments now. He was still short of 3 Origin Source Fragments. What Yi Hao didn't know was that his luck was already very good. In the Myriad Kingdom continent, no one had ever been able to collect 6 Origin Source Fragments in such a short period of time. This was because to find these 9 Origin Source Fragments in the Myriad Kingdom continent was like looking for a needle in a haystack. This was because the fragments were hidden in every corner of the continent and no one could be sure of their exact location. However, Yi Hao already had some doubts about the next Origin Source Fragment. Chapter 563. Yi Hao took out the Beast Monster sect leader token. He had a feeling that the source fragment in Beast Raw Valley was related to this sect leader token. But there were 3 of them and he only had 1. The other 2 were in Mu Shengzon and 1 was in Gudanzan. As for the Gudanzan token, Yi Hao believed that with Guo Shuafu there, Guo Zhenyu wouldn't make things difficult for him. He just needed to find Mu Shengzon's sect leader token. Mu Shengzon, it's time to settle our debt. Yi Hao still couldn't forget that time when he was almost beaten to death. So much time had passed and it was time for him to take revenge. Go to court. Yi Hao still planned to make arrangements for everyone before heading to Mu Shengzon. In the main hall of the Fire Dragon Empire, Yi Hao sat on the dragon throne and looked down at the officials. The officials felt the aura from Yi Hao's body and no one dared to say a word. Tell me, what is going on with the Wang family? Did any of you accept bribes from the Wang family? Yi Hao still didn't calm down about the Wang family's anger. It was just a small family and they actually dared to be the overlord of the imperial capital. This was only because he had discovered it. If he hadn't discovered it, who knew what would have happened in the future? If he wasn't in the imperial capital one day, wouldn't the empire be destroyed? Moreover, apart from the Wang family, who knew how many other families like the Wang family were in the imperial court? We are useless, Your Majesty, please punish us. Li Hong was the first to kneel on the ground. Following which, the officials all knelt on the ground. I will definitely establish a life and death guard that I will be in charge of. The life guard will be in charge of protecting the Fire Dragon Empire and the death guard will be in charge of investigating the officials. If there is any corruption, they will be executed. Now that the Fire Dragon Empire was rapidly developing, there had to be heavy punishments. As there were new blood joining the Fire Dragon Empire, there would always be some trash and evil people. If he didn't act as a deterrent, chaos would ensue sooner or later. Death Queen! Yi Hao suddenly shouted. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in the hall. It was clad in pitch-black armor and wore a metal mask. His entire person looked very mysterious. In the future, you will be in charge of the Death Guard. Remember, from first-rank officials to commoners, as long as there is conclusive evidence, kill them immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. After saying that, the Queen of Death intentionally released her cultivation. This was all arranged by Yi Hao. That was because if he didn't use his cultivation to suppress them, he wouldn't be able to intimidate them. Hearing the Queen of Death's cold and hoarse voice, the officials felt their hearts tremble. Following that, the Grim Reaper's aura pressed down on them, causing them to be unable to breathe. They had a feeling that the Queen of Death didn't even need to do anything. She could kill them with just a thought. From now on, the few of you will still listen to the Queen of Death's orders. Just as Yi Hao's words left his mouth, everyone saw another 9 Death God's emissaries appear in the hall. Yes, Your Majesty, the 9 Death Guards replied in the same hoarse voice. At the same time, they released their cultivation. Suddenly, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone could hear the sound of their own heartbeats. Following that, Yi Hao's gaze swept across the crowd. The more flustered the officials were, the more he looked at them. These officials were more or less guilty of taking bribes and bending the law, but their crimes didn't warrant death. However, now that Yi Hao was staring at them, they felt even more guilty. Plop! Suddenly, one of the officials couldn't take it anymore and knelt on the ground in fright. Your Majesty, I am guilty. I am guilty. Please punish me, Your Majesty. If you fall down for investigation, you will have to turn over a new leaf. If you are guilty, you will be demoted. If you are guilty, you will be stripped of your position. If you are guilty, you will be beheaded. Yi Hao said to the Death Queen. The Grim Reaper Queen waved her hand, and a Grim Reaper emissary immediately pulled the official down. Wait a moment. Since you came out to confess your crimes, your punishment can be reduced, Yi Hao said to the official. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. The official hurriedly thanked him. He had only been greedy for some money. At most, he would be demoted. However, with Yi Hao's words, it was very likely that he wouldn't be demoted. After all, It hadn't been easy for him to climb to his current position. He didn't want to be demoted. When he felt the cold aura of the Death Guard's metal armor beside him, his legs couldn't help but tremble. He swore that even if he died, he wouldn't do anything that involved taking bribes or bending the law again. If you confess your crimes, your punishment can be reduced. If the Death Guards investigate, your crimes will be increase. Yi Hao suddenly shouted. Then, he activated the Sky Dragon throne. The imperial aura on his body was undoubtedly exposed and suppressed the civil and military officials. Roar! The rainbow dragon behind the Sky Dragon throne suddenly roared. Yi Hao listened to the roar of the rainbow dragon. He felt that the shadow of the rainbow dragon seemed to have become much stronger. However, now that he was reorganizing the imperial court, he didn't have time to care about the changes in the Sky Dragon throne for the time being. Yi Hao now had 30 billion dragon power. The dragon power and the imperial aura complemented each other. Therefore, one could imagine how astonishing the imperial aura on Yi Hao's body was. The imperial aura turned into a huge deterrent force that pressed down on everyone. Yi Hao led 1,000 ancient beasts and Guo Yifan to Mu Shengzon. As for the other sky-devouring rats and ancient beasts, Yi Hao left them all in the Fire Dragon Empire. It seems like the war between Mu Shengzon and the Bai Sheng Holy Dynasty is not over yet. Yi Hao looked at Mu Shengzon's territory. Smoke was everywhere, and from time to time, he could see the flags of the Bai Sheng Holy Dynasty and Mu Shengzon. Smoke and flames of war were everywhere. Of course, the war between Mu Shengzon and the Bai Sheng Holy Dynasty was mostly instigated by Yi Hao. However, Yi Hao also knew that he was just the fuse that ignited the war. He did not believe that Mu Shengzon and the Bai Sheng Holy Dynasty would fight to this extent because of his instigation. Obviously, there was something else that he did not know. However, he did not have time to care about this. He only wanted to find the sect master token of the spiritual pill sect. After collecting the 3 sect master tokens, he would go look for the origin source fragments. Now that he was surrounded by enemies, he could only rely on collecting all the origin source fragments to unlock all the generals. Yi Hao stood at the entrance of the Mu Shengzon holy ground. A disciple guarding the gate said rudely, "Who are you? How dare you barge into the Mu Shengzon holy ground? If you don't want to die, get your sect master out here." Yi Hao did not take this kind of small fry seriously and said, "How arrogant. Brothers, take him down." The disciple waved his hand and a dozen disciples rushed out and surrounded Yi Hao. "Kneel." Yi Hao spat out a single word. Then, his chi rolled out and collided with the bodies of those people. The disciples could not withstand it. They all spat out blood and knelt in front of Yi Hao. The disciples' faces were pale as they stared at Yi Hao with their eyes wide open. They did not expect Yi Hao to be so powerful. "Just you wait. I will go and find our Grand Master now." A disciple who was slightly stronger wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and pointed at Yi Hao as he ran into Mu Shengzon in a hurry. Yi Hao was not in a hurry. He had traveled for a long time and it was time for him to rest. Yi Hao took out the celestial dragon throne and a bottle of good wine that he had exchanged for. He slowly tasted it. In Mu Shengzon, the Mu Sheng patriarch was not the only one in the palace. Emperor Wen was there as well. Emperor Wen said with a crying face, "Grand Master, you can't just leave me like this. I don't want my dynasty to be destroyed." The Mu Sheng patriarch said with displeasure, "You are to blame for being useless. Right now, you are Emperor Wen. You don't have any dragon power. How am I supposed to help you? But Grand Master, you can't just watch me, Emperor Wen, die like this. I, Emperor Wen, have worked hard for you." Emperor Wen continued to plead with a crying face. Where is the law enforcement hall? Seeing so many ancient strange beasts suddenly appear, Mu Sheng Patriarch's expression changed, but he still shouted in a deep voice. Here. As soon as Mu Sheng Patriarch finished speaking, a group of guards in black armor flew out from the crowd, holding 10-meter-long sabers in their hands. There were almost 100 of them. Most of them were martial sages, and many of them were martial gods. Kill them. Although the law enforcement team was here, they still gave him a lot of pressure. Therefore, he had to strike first. Following his order, the law enforcement team rushed out like an arrow released from a bow. Roar, roar, roar. The ancient strange beasts were not to be trifled with. Although they were no match for high-level martial gods, they could still deal with low-level martial gods by relying on their numbers. Moreover, the law enforcement team could not kill the ancient strange beasts in one blow, so they could only cause little damage to the ancient strange beasts. On the other hand, the ancient strange beasts could take turns to attack. Patriarch, these are not ordinary demonic beasts. They are stronger than ordinary demonic beast. As soon as the law enforcement team rushed out, they were attacked fiercely. In the blink of an eye, they suffered heavy casualties. Mu Sheng Patriarch's face was gloomy. He did not expect these demonic beasts to be so powerful. How could they have known that these demonic beasts in Yi Hao were all ancient strange beasts? How could ordinary demonic beasts compare to them? Do I really have to hand over the token? Mu Sheng Patriarch thought in his heart. Originally, there were 5 patriarchs in the sect. However, one of them died, and the other patriarchs went to maintain the order, but they disappeared without a trace. If something happened to the law enforcement team, then Mu Shengzon would really be destroyed in his hands. In fact, he did not know that the 4 patriarchs of Mu Shengzon had already been taken in by Yi Hao. If he knew, who knew what he would think? He might even have thoughts of suicide. Seeing that his law enforcement team had suffered heavy casualties, Mu Sheng Patriarch could not hold on any longer and wanted to admit defeat. Stop! Suddenly, a loud shout interrupted his thoughts. Seeing a figure flying out from the sect, Mu Sheng Patriarch's eyes shone with a glimmer of hope. Hearing this voice, Yi Hao suddenly sat up straight. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. You're not dead. In the blink of an eye, Mu Zheng was standing in front of Yi Hao. You've come out of seclusion? Mu Sheng Patriarch looked at Mu Zheng with a complicated expression. This was because Mu Zheng was none other than his disciple. At first, Mu Zheng was very filial to him. However, later on, Mu Zheng cultivated Mu Shengzon's cultivation method that others could not cultivate. Since then, Mu Zheng had been cultivating in seclusion. Later on, when Mu Zheng's cultivation level surpassed his, he no longer took him seriously. At this time, Mu Sheng Patriarch realized that he could no longer see through Mu Zheng's cultivation level. This proved that Mu Zheng's cultivation level had surpassed his by too much. He could not help but sigh at how powerful that cultivation method was. However, he could not do anything about it. Ordinary people could not cultivate that cultivation method. At this time, he did not know whether he should be happy or not. This was because he was very unhappy when he saw Mu Zheng's indifferent attitude toward him. After all, no matter what, Mu Zheng used to be his disciple. Mu Zheng's achievements today were also due to his efforts. Moreover, Mu Shengzon was now in deep danger. Whether he could survive or not depended on Mu Zheng. Brat, you killed one of my clones. How do you want to die? Mu Zheng's expression did not change as he looked at Yi Hao and asked. What? Are you very arrogant as an 8th-order martial god? Yi Hao used the system to check Mu Zheng's cultivation level and asked with a smile. At the very least, it's not a problem to kill trash like you. Mu Zheng's gaze swept over all the ancient mutated beasts. He did not put them in his eyes at all. With his 8th-order martial god cultivation, it was enough to kill all these ancient mutated beasts. He had always been an arrogant and despotic person, and he was also a person who would seek revenge for the slightest mistake. Ever since Yi Hao killed his clone, he had always wanted to kill Yi Hao. He did not expect Yi Hao to take the initiative to deliver himself to him. Wasn't this courting death? Since Yi Hao was courting death, Then he would satisfy Yi Hao's request. Chapter 566. With his cultivation level, he could tell at a glance that the celestial dragon throne was a legendary artifact. As long as he killed Yi Hao, the celestial dragon throne would belong to him. At the thought of this, Mu Zheng could no longer suppress the greed in his heart. He took out his weapon and attacked Yi Hao. Go to hell, you little bee ****. Mu Zheng thought smugly. Yi Fan, play with him. Seeing Mu Zheng rushing toward him, Yi Hao did not panic at all. He summoned Guo Yifan immediately. Guo Yifan was at the peak of the martial god realm. Naturally, Mu Zheng was completely suppressed by Guo Yifan. How is this possible? There's another powerhouse. Mu Zheng panicked when Guo Yifan suddenly attacked him. He retreated in a hurry. However, his speed was much slower than Guo Yifan's. He was hit in the chest by Guo Yifan and was sent flying. Mu Zheng Patriarch was speechless when he saw that it was Mu Zheng who was sent flying. He did not expect that even Mu Zheng would not be a match for Guo Yifan. Run! Mu Zheng knew that as long as there was life, there was hope. He did not think too much about it. He immediately got up and started to run. Chen-ph, trying to escape? It's not that easy. Guo Yifan sneered and chased after Mu Zheng. Mu Zheng was nervous. He did not expect that Guo Yifan would continue to chase after him even after he ran away. If he was given time, he would soon surpass Guo Yifan in terms of cultivation level. However, he had to be given time to cultivate. However, at the moment, his cultivation level was much lower than Guo Yifan's. He was definitely no match for Guo Yifan. He had no other choice but to run. Fart. Suddenly, Mu Zheng felt a pain in his chest. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Mu Zheng's body fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. Ha! Just as Mu Zheng was about to hit the ground, Mu Zheng suddenly roared and charged at Guo Yifan like a madman. I'll kill you. Mu Zheng looked like he was going to perish together with Guo Yifan, determined to perish together with him. Explode! Mu Zheng roared. He chose to explode and die. Get out of the way! Yi Hao shouted anxiously. Guo Yifan's expression changed when she saw Mu Zheng's actions. She frantically flew backward. Ha ha ha, I will definitely get my revenge. Mu Zheng laughed maniacally as if he was not afraid of death. Get out of the way! Mu Zheng Patriarch did not expect Mu Zheng to make such a crazy move. Exploding one's body to death was no joke. That was when a martial artist condensed all of their cultivation together and then exploded. The explosion of an 8th-order martial god's body was definitely more powerful than the strongest attack of a peak martial god. That powerful force would definitely raise Mu Shengzon to the ground. Moreover, Mu Shengzon had so many disciples. Yi Hao suspected that Mu Zheng had a grudge against Mu Shengzon. Which faction did Mu Zheng belong to? Moreover, the power cultivated by all the clones could be superimposed on the user's original body. It was like cultivating by yourself. With the 1,000 trickery 100 transformations, it was like 100 people were cultivating for the same person at the same time. One could only imagine how terrifying it was. Yi Hao finally understood why Mu Zheng's cultivation was so fast. It was all thanks to the 1,000 trickery 100 transformations. And why did Mu Zheng shout those words without fear of death at the last moment? It turned out that Mu Zheng already knew that he would not die. It's a pity that I didn't kill him. I wonder how many clones he has. Yi Hao frowned and said regretfully. Because he did not kill Mu Zheng in one fell swoop, it was bound to be a disaster for him. With such a heaven-defying cultivation technique like the 1,000 trickery 100 transformations, Mu Zheng's growth was limitless. And most importantly, he had always been in the open. Mu Zheng was different. Mu Zheng could hide in the dark. If Mu Zheng jumped out and dealt him a fatal blow when he was in danger, it would not be fun. But there was no other way. He had no way of knowing how many clones Mu Zhang had cultivated and where Mu Zhang's clones were hiding. Ding dong, do you want to learn the God-level cultivation technique 1000 trickery 100 transformations? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,